Hey, still awake? Yeah, I figured. Nights like this have a way of stretching on forever, don't they? When your mind won't quiet down no matter how tired the rest of you feels. So let's just sit together for a little while. I've got 5 stories for you tonight, and the sound of rain to fill the empty spaces. Nothing loud, nothing overwhelming, just something steady to drift off to. Story 1. Someone tried my door handle every morning at 5 a.m. So, this happened about 2 years ago when I was 23. I'd just moved into my first apartment completely on my own. No roommates, no boyfriend, no one. Just me. And honestly, I was so proud of myself. I'd been living with this girl named Kelsey for about a year before that, and it had been a nightmare. She was one of those people who seemed totally normal at first, then slowly revealed herself to be absolutely unhinged. Passive-aggressive notes on the fridge, borrowing my clothes without asking, bringing random guys home at 3 a.m. on weeknights. By the end, we weren't even speaking. I'd come home from work and lock myself in my room just to avoid her. So when I found this apartment, a little one-bedroom in an older building on the east side of the city, I jumped on it. The rent was cheap, almost suspiciously cheap, but I told myself it was because the place was small and on the ground floor. Nobody wants ground floor, right? No view, less light, easier for break-ins. But I didn't care. I was 23 and invincible. I just wanted out of that house, away from Kelsey, into a space that was finally fully mine. The building itself was nothing special, built in the 70s, red brick exterior, that kind of industrial carpeting in the hallways that's meant to hide stains. My unit was one of 4 on the ground floor, 2 on each side of the main entrance. The front door of the building was supposed to lock automatically, but half the time it didn't catch right. I noticed that the first week, but figured I'd mention it to the super eventually. Never got around to it. My apartment had its charms, though. Original hardwood floors that creaked in all the right places. An old radiator under the window that clanked and hissed like it was alive. The afternoon light came through my kitchen window in this warm golden way that made the whole place glow. I bought plants, a pothos, a snake plant, a little succulent I was convinced I'd kill within a month. I hung fairy lights around my bedroom window, made it cozy. Those first few weeks, I felt like I was finally becoming the person I wanted to be. Independent, capable. I had a routine. Wake up around 7, make coffee in my little French press, work my customer service job from home until 5. I was doing insurance claims, not glamorous, not fulfilling, but it paid the bills and I could do it in my pajamas. After work, I'd cook dinner, watch something mindless on TV, scroll through my phone until my eyes burned. Weekends, I'd explore the neighborhood, find little coffee shops, pretend I was the main character of some indie movie about a girl finding herself in the city. At night, I'd fall asleep to the sound of rain against the window. It rained a lot that autumn, and the white noise of the radiator clicking on and off. Sometimes I'd hear cars passing on the wet pavement outside, their tires making that soft, hushing sound. It was peaceful, safe. I'd lie in bed and think, this is it. This is what I worked for. I wasn't naive about safety, not really. I always locked the deadbolt and put the chain on before bed. Checked them twice, actually. Once when I locked up. Once before I turned off the lights. I'd grown up with a mom who was borderline paranoid about that stuff, and I guess it stuck. But I wasn't scared. I didn't lie awake listening for sounds or jump at every creak. The neighborhood wasn't the best, but it wasn't the worst either. I felt comfortable there. My neighbors seemed fine. There was an older couple above me, the Hendersons, I think, who I'd wave to when I checked the mail. The unit next to mine always seemed empty. I never heard anyone in there. Never saw anyone come or go. I figured maybe it was between tenants, or maybe the person just worked weird hours. I didn't think much about it. I remember this one night, maybe 3 weeks after I moved in, lying in bed during a thunderstorm. The rain was coming down hard, drumming against the glass, and I could hear thunder rumbling somewhere in the distance. The radiator was clanking away, doing its best against the cold that was starting to creep in as October turned to November. I remember thinking how lucky I was, how this little apartment, cheap and ground floor and imperfect as it was, felt more like home than anywhere I'd lived in years. I felt completely safe there, completely settled. That was before I woke up at 5 a.m. to the sound of someone trying my door handle. At first, I convinced myself I'd dreamed it. You know that feeling when you wake up suddenly and you're not sure what pulled you out of sleep? That disoriented, heart-pounding moment where you're scanning the darkness, trying to figure out what's wrong? That's how it started. I was lying on my side, facing the wall, when my eyes snapped open. The room was pitch black, that heavy, thick darkness you only get at 5 a.m. in late autumn, when sunrise is still hours away. For a second, I just lay there, frozen, listening. The radiator was silent. The rain had stopped at some point during the night. Everything was still. Then I heard it, the soft, mechanical click of a door handle being pushed down, held for a moment, then released. My heart slammed against my ribs. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just lay there, eyes wide open, staring at nothing, every muscle in my body locked tight. I waited for something else, footsteps, another sound, anything. But there was only silence. That awful, pressing silence that feels louder than noise. I don't know how long I stayed like that. 5 minutes, maybe 10. Eventually, I forced myself to get up. My legs felt like they were made of water as I crept through the apartment, my phone clutched in my hand with 911 already typed in, thumb hovering over the call button. I checked the peephole first. Nothing but the empty hallway, lit by that sickly yellow fluorescent light that never turned off. I checked the deadbolt, locked, the chain, still on, everything exactly as I'd left it. I told myself I'd dreamed it. Old buildings make noises, right? Pipes settle, wood expands and contracts, doors shift in their frames. That's all it was. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. I just lay there until my alarm went off at 7, watching the ceiling slowly turn gray as the sun came up. The next night, I almost forgot about it. Almost. But when I locked up before bed, I checked the chain 3 times instead of 2. Just in case. 5 a.m. My eyes opened. The handle again. That same soft click. Down. Hold. Release. This time, I knew I wasn't dreaming. I was fully awake, fully aware, and I heard it. Clear as anything. Someone was on the other side of my door, trying the handle. I grabbed my phone and crept to the door, my bare feet silent on the hardwood. Pressed my eye to the peephole, hands trembling. The hallway was empty. No one there. No footsteps retreating. No doors closing. Just nothing. I texted my friend Sarah at 5:47 a.m. Something weird is happening. Someone tried my door handle, twice now, same time, both nights. She didn't respond until almost 9. That's creepy. Probably just a drunk neighbor or something. Wrong apartment, maybe. I wanted to believe her. I really, really wanted to believe her. So I told myself that's what it was. Some confused person, maybe coming home late from a bar, trying the wrong door. It happens. It's a reasonable explanation. I could live with that. But I checked the locks 4 times that night. The 3rd morning, I set an alarm for 4:55 a.m. I needed to know. I needed to be awake, alert, waiting. If it happened again, I wanted to be ready. I lay in the darkness, watching the minutes tick by on my phone screen. 4:56, 4:57, 4:58. My heart was already pounding, and nothing had even happened yet. The apartment was so quiet, I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Outside, a light rain had started up again, pattering softly against the window. The radiator clicked on, then off, then on again. 4:59, 5 o'clock. The handle moved, slow, deliberate, down, hold, release. I stopped breathing. My whole body went rigid, like every nerve had been electrified. I stared at the ceiling, tears pricking at my eyes, too terrified to move, too terrified to even look toward the door. No footsteps before, no footsteps after. Whoever it was, they just appeared, tried the handle, and vanished. I waited 15 minutes before I could make myself get up. Checked the peephole, nothing. Checked the locks, secure. I stood there in my dark living room, shaking, and thought, this isn't random. This is a pattern. Someone was coming to my door every single morning at exactly 5 a.m. I started losing sleep, not just from waking up at 5, from the dread of knowing it was coming. I'd lie awake until 2, 3 a.m., knowing that in a few hours someone would be standing outside my door. My work started to suffer. I was making mistakes on claims, zoning out during calls, snapping at customers. I stopped cooking dinner and just ate cereal or crackers. The apartment that had felt so cozy now felt like a trap. On the 4th morning, I told myself I'd talk to the building super. His name was Ray, heavyset guy, mid-50s, always seemed vaguely annoyed about everything. I caught him in the hallway around noon and explained what was happening. Tried to sound calm, rational, not like a hysterical woman making things up. He barely looked at me. Old building, he said, shrugging. Things settle, doors shift, probably just the frame expanding. At exactly 5 a.m. every single night? Another shrug. Coincidence. I wouldn't worry about it. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just nodded and went back to my apartment and checked the locks and told myself that maybe he was right. Maybe I was overreacting. That night, I looked at my door more closely, really looked at it. And that's when I noticed the scratches. Faint marks around the lock plate, thin, shallow lines in the metal, like someone had been working at it with a tool. They were subtle, easy to miss if you weren't looking, but I was looking now. And I knew. Whoever was trying my door every morning wasn't checking to see if I'd forgotten to lock up. They were figuring out how to get in. I needed proof. Not for anyone else. I was past caring whether Ray or Sarah or anyone believed me. I needed proof for myself. Something concrete. Something I could look at and know without any doubt that I wasn't losing my mind. So I set up my phone to record. I propped it on my dresser, angled toward the front door, and hit record before I went to bed. The battery would last through the night if I closed all my apps. I'd have hours of footage of nothing, probably. Just my dark apartment, the occasional headlights sweeping across the ceiling, the sound of rain. But if something happened, when something happened, I'd have it. That night, I barely slept. I kept glancing at the phone, its little red recording light glowing in the darkness like a single unblinking eye. The rain was heavier than usual, drumming steadily against the window, and the wind had picked up, rattling the bare branches of the tree outside against the glass. I pulled the blankets up to my chin and waited. I must have drifted off at some point because I woke up to my alarm at 6:30. For a moment, I just lay there, heart already racing, afraid to check the footage, afraid of what I'd see, afraid of what I wouldn't see. I made myself get up, made myself pick up the phone, made myself scroll through the timeline. 5 hours, 12 minutes a.m. The handle moved, clear as day in the dim footage. Down, hold for 2 seconds, release. No sound on the recording. I hadn't realized the microphone wouldn't pick up something that quiet, but I could see it. The handle, moving on its own. Pushed down by someone on the other side. I watched it 11 times, 12. I lost count. Each time, my stomach turned a little more. There it was, proof. Undeniable, unmistakable proof. Someone was doing this. Someone real. Someone physical. Someone who stood outside my door at 5 a.m. every single morning and tried to get in. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I found Ray in the basement, fiddling with the boiler. Didn't even wait for him to acknowledge me, just shoved the phone in his face and hit play. "Watch," I said. My voice sounded strange, thin and tight. He watched. I saw his expression change, that dismissive annoyance melting into something else. Concern, maybe. Or maybe just the realization that he couldn't brush this off anymore. "Huh," he said when it ended. That was it. Just, huh. "Someone is trying to get into my apartment," I said. "Every night, at 5 a.m. I have proof now. I need you to do something." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed, this heavy, defeated sound, and told me to follow him. We went to the front entrance of the building. Ray crouched down and examined the lock on the main door, the one that was supposed to keep strangers out. He poked at it, wiggled something, muttered under his breath. "Lock's been tampered with," he finally said. "Mechanisms all chewed up. Someone's been messing with it. Probably why it hasn't been latching right." "For how long?" He shrugged. "Couldn't say. Could be weeks. Could be months." Months. Someone could have been walking into this building, unchallenged, for months. Walking right up to my door, trying the handle, and no one knew. No one noticed. No one cared. "What about the person who lived in my apartment before me?" I asked. The question came out before I'd fully formed it in my mind. Something about the way Ray wouldn't meet my eyes. The way he kept fidgeting with his keys. "What about her? Who was she? Why did she leave?" He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched out between us, filled only by the distant hum of the boiler and the muffled sound of rain against the basement windows. "Young woman," he finally said. "About your age. Moved in last spring, left in July, broke her lease, forfeited her deposit. Didn't say why. Did she seem scared?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my blood run cold. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She seemed scared." I filed a police report that afternoon, called the non-emergency line, explained everything, showed up at the station with my video. The officer who took my statement was a tired-looking guy in his 40s, and to his credit, he listened. Really listened. Didn't dismiss me or tell me I was overreacting. But he was honest with me too. "Without more evidence, there's not a lot we can do," he said, handing my phone back. "No one's actually entered your apartment. No one's made direct threats. Legally, trying a door handle isn't a crime. So I'm supposed to just wait until something happens?" His expression softened. I could tell he felt bad. I could tell he'd probably had this exact conversation 100 times with 100 other women, all of them scared, all of them told the same thing. "We can't help you. Not yet. Not until it's too late." "Get a security camera," he said. "A real one, not just your phone. Change your locks if you can afford it. Vary your routine. And if anything escalates, anything at all, call 911 immediately." I thanked him and left. The rain was coming down in sheets by then, soaking through my jacket before I even made it to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, water dripping from my hair, watching the windshield blur with rain. That night, I checked the scratches on my lock plate again. I could swear they were deeper, more defined, like someone had been working on them while I slept. And on the floor of the hallway, just outside my door, I found a thin piece of metal, small, filed down at one end, the kind of thing you might use to pick a lock. They weren't just testing anymore, they were getting ready. I couldn't live like this anymore. The waiting, the dread, lying in bed every night, watching the hours crawl by, knowing that at 5 a.m., someone would be standing outside my door, trying to get in, getting closer every single night. I needed to see them. I needed to know who it was. So I decided to stay awake. I moved my couch so it faced the door directly. Made a pot of coffee, strong, bitter, the kind that burns your throat going down. turned off every light in the apartment until the only illumination came from the streetlights filtering through the blinds, casting long pale stripes across the floor. I sat down in the darkness, wrapped in a blanket, and I waited. The hours passed slowly, painfully. Outside, the rain had softened to a light drizzle, barely audible against the window. The radiator clicked on around midnight, then off again, then on. I watched the shadows on the ceiling shift as cars passed on the street. I checked my phone obsessively. 12:30, 1:15, 2:00. My eyes burned. My body ached for sleep. But every time I felt myself starting to drift, I'd think about those scratches on the lock, that piece of metal on the floor, the woman who lived here before me, who got so scared she broke her lease and ran. I wasn't going to run. Not yet. Not until I knew what I was running from. 3 a.m. The coffee had gone cold, but I drank it anyway. My hands were trembling from the caffeine, from the exhaustion, from the fear. I couldn't tell anymore. Everything had blurred together into one long, awful night. 3:30. The rain stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. Heavy, expectant, like the whole world was holding its breath. 4 o'clock, 1 hour left. I sat up straighter, wrapped the blanket tighter around my shoulders. My heart was already starting to race. 4:30, I could feel it coming, that sick, anticipatory dread, like standing at the top of a roller coaster waiting for the drop. 4:45. Nothing, just silence, just the darkness, just me, alone, staring at my door. 4:55. I set down my coffee mug. My mouth was dry. My palms were slick with sweat. 4:58. I heard footsteps, soft, careful. The quiet pad of feet on industrial carpet, coming down the hallway, coming closer. My heart stopped. Everything stopped. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't think. I just sat there, frozen, listening to those footsteps get closer and closer and closer. They stopped, right outside my door. I could feel him there. I know that sounds crazy, but I could feel his presence just a few feet away, separated from me by nothing but a few inches of wood. The air in the apartment felt different, charged, wrong. 5 a.m. The handle moved, but this time it didn't stop. It kept turning, all the way down. And then, pressure, real pressure against the door. He was pushing, testing, seeing how much give there was. The chain caught. The door opened 2 inches. And through that gap, through that tiny sliver of darkness, I saw a face. Pale, male, maybe mid-40s, maybe older. Stubble on his jaw, patchy and unkempt. His hair was thinning, greasy, plastered to his forehead. But it was his eyes that I'll never forget. Flat, empty, like looking into two dead things. No emotion, no expression, just watching. He saw me. I saw him. For one horrible, endless second, neither of us moved. Neither of us breathed. We just stared at each other through that 2-inch gap, predator and prey. And I understood, really understood, that this was real. This was happening. There was a stranger trying to break into my apartment, and he was looking right at me. Then he smiled. Just a small smile. Just a slight curl at the corners of his lips. Like this was funny. Like this was exactly what he wanted. I screamed. I don't remember deciding to scream. It just ripped out of me, this raw, primal sound that didn't even feel like it came from my body. The door slammed shut. Footsteps, fast now, running, disappearing down the hallway. And then I was on the floor. I don't remember falling. I don't remember anything between the scream and finding myself curled up on the hardwood, my phone in my hand, my whole body shaking so violently I could barely see the screen. I called 911. I think I was crying. I think I was saying words, but I don't know what they were. The police came. 2 officers, a man and a woman. They searched the building, the parking lot, the street. Nothing. He was gone. Vanished into the darkness like he'd never been there at all. They took my statement. They looked at the scratches on my lock, the video on my phone. They were kind, professional. But I could see it in their eyes, that familiar helplessness, that look that said, "We believe you, but there's nothing we can do." The female officer stayed with me until sunrise. She sat on my couch where I'd been sitting just hours before, and she didn't say much, just stayed. I think she knew I couldn't be alone. I think she'd seen this before. I watched the sky turn gray through my window. Watched the streetlights flicker off. Watched the world wake up like nothing had happened. Like some man hadn't just tried to break into my apartment. Like I hadn't just looked into the eyes of someone who wanted to hurt me. I couldn't stop shaking. Even hours later, even after the sun came up, even after the officers left, I couldn't stop shaking. I didn't stay another night. As soon as the sun was fully up, I started packing. I didn't fold anything, didn't organize, didn't think. I just grabbed handfuls of clothes and shoved them into garbage bags, toiletries, my laptop, chargers, the essentials. Everything else could wait. Everything else didn't matter. I called my mom from the car. I don't remember what I said exactly. Something about a break-in, something about needing to come home. I remember her voice changing, that shift from casual to urgent in a single breath. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "Come home. Right now. I'll be here." The drive was 45 minutes. I don't remember any of it. I just remember pulling into her driveway and sitting there with the engine running, staring at the house I grew up in, and finally letting myself cry. Big, ugly, heaving sobs that shook my whole body. All that fear I'd been holding in for weeks, it all came pouring out at once. My mom met me at the door. She didn't say anything, just wrapped her arms around me and held on tight. I cried into her shoulder like I was 5 years old again, like the world was too big and too scary and the only safe place was right there in her arms. I told her everything. The door handle, the 5 a.m. visits, the scratches, the video, the police report that went nowhere, and the face, that pale, flat-eyed face staring at me through the gap. That smile. She listened without interrupting, and when I was done, she said, "You're not going back there. Ever." I didn't argue. I broke my lease the next day. Called the landlord, told them I was out, told them I didn't care about the deposit. They tried to push back, something about 30 days notice, something about fees, but I hung up on them. I couldn't bring myself to care about money, not after what I'd seen. The police followed up twice over the next few weeks. The first time, they told me they'd canvassed the neighborhood, talked to other residents, checked cameras from nearby businesses. Nothing. No leads, no matches. The second time, they told me the same thing, but gentler, like they were preparing me to accept that this was how it would end. Open case, no resolution, no justice. I never found out who he was. I spent weeks searching online, looking for any news about break-ins or stalkers in that area. I found a few old forum posts about the building, vague complaints mostly, strange noises, uncomfortable encounters. One post from 3 years ago mentioned a creepy guy who hung around the parking lot at night, but there was no description, no follow-up. Just another anonymous voice, warning no one in particular. I tried to find the woman who lived in my apartment before me, the one Ray said had left so suddenly. I searched every combination of keywords I could think of, scrolled through social media for hours. Nothing. She was a ghost. Maybe she wanted it that way. Maybe she'd learned, like I was learning, that sometimes disappearing is the only way to feel safe. Ray called me once, about a month after I left. He said they'd finally fixed the lock on the front door, said they were taking security more seriously now. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just said, "Good," and hung up. I found out later, from a girl who'd moved into the building after me, who found my old posts online and reached out, that at least 2 other women had experienced the same thing. Same apartment, same time, same door handle, turning slowly at 5 a.m. Neither of them had stayed more than a few months either. The building still rents out that unit. Ground floor, cheap. They never warn anyone. I live in a different city now. 3rd floor apartment, good neighborhood, security cameras in the hallways. I have a deadbolt, a chain, and a doorstop I wedge under the door every night. I have pepper spray on my nightstand and a baseball bat in my closet. My friends think I'm paranoid. Maybe I am. But I still wake up at 5 a.m. sometimes. Not every night. Not even every week. But sometimes, for no reason at all, my eyes will snap open in the darkness, and I'll lie there, heart pounding, listening, waiting for that sound, that soft, mechanical click, the handle turning. It never comes. Not anymore. But my body remembers. My body will always remember. I check my locks 3 times before bed now, every single night. I know it's excessive. I know it probably looks crazy, but I don't care. I'll never trust a door the same way again. I'll never feel completely safe in any apartment, no matter how many locks I have, no matter how high up I am. That feeling, that sense of security I had in those first few weeks, when I thought I'd finally made it, finally built a life of my own, he took that from me. Whoever he is, wherever he is, he took something from me that I'll never get back. And that's what haunts me the most. Not the sound of the handle, not even his face through that gap, pale and empty and wrong. It's that smile, that small, knowing smile, like he'd been waiting for me to see him. Like my fear was the whole point. Like he'd been playing a game, and I'd finally figured out the rules, and that made it better for him somehow. I think about the women who came before me. I think about the women who might come after. I wonder if he's still out there, still doing this, still standing outside some other girl's door at 5 a.m., waiting, testing, getting ready. If you're reading this and something feels wrong, if you hear sounds you can't explain, if your gut tells you something isn't right, please, please listen to it. Don't wait. Don't rationalize. Don't worry about seeming paranoid or dramatic or crazy. Those instincts exist for a reason. They kept our ancestors alive. They'll keep you alive too, if you let them. Trust yourself, even when no one else does. And if you're him, if you're reading this somehow, if you recognize yourself in these words, I want you to know something. I saw your face. I'll never forget it. And someday, someone is going to stop you. Story 2. My phone received a video of my apartment, sent from my own number. I need to explain something first, because this story doesn't make sense without context. I'm not a paranoid person. I've never been the type to jump at shadows or assume the worst. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, moved to the city for grad school, and spent most of my 20s being too busy and too broke to worry about much beyond rent and deadlines. I didn't have enemies. I didn't have stalkers. I was just a guy, 26 years old, studying urban planning, living alone for the first time in a cheap 1-bedroom apartment that smelled faintly of the previous tenant's cigarettes no matter how many candles I burned. The apartment wasn't much, but it was mine. Second floor of a 3-story walk-up, right above a nail salon that closed at 7 p.m. every night. The building was old, exposed brick, radiators that clanged like someone was trapped inside them, windows that let in a draft no matter how much weather stripping I applied. But the rent was manageable, the neighborhood was decent, and I could walk to campus in 15 minutes. For a grad student on a stipend, that's about as good as it gets. I'd been living there since the previous May, so by the time this happened, early February, I'd settled into a routine. Classes on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Research assistant work on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Evenings spent hunched over my laptop at the little desk I'd crammed into the corner of my bedroom, the radiator hissing softly beneath the window, the sounds of the city muffled by the constant low hum of traffic. I'd fall asleep most nights to podcasts or ambient noise videos, my phone charging on the nightstand next to me. That phone is important. It was just a standard iPhone, nothing fancy, a model that was already 2 generations old by that point. I used it for everything: texts, emails, music, maps, the occasional doom scroll through social media when I should have been working. It was practically an extension of my hand. I knew every notification sound, every vibration pattern. I could identify who was texting me just by the rhythm of the buzz. So when I got a text from my own number, I noticed. It was a Thursday night, around 11 p.m. I was in bed, half watching some documentary on my laptop, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up without really thinking about it, just muscle memory, the automatic reach for the screen. The notification said I had a new message, from me. I stared at it for a second, confused. I figured it was a glitch, maybe some spam that had spoofed my number. That happens sometimes, right? Scammers make it look like the call or text is coming from a familiar number, so you're more likely to open it. I almost deleted it without looking, but I didn't. I opened the message. There was no text, just a video attachment, 10 seconds long. I tapped play. The video was dark, grainy, shot in low light. It took me a moment to understand what I was looking at, and then my stomach dropped. It was my living room, my couch, my coffee table, the blanket I'd left draped over the armrest that morning, the window with the crooked blinds I kept meaning to fix. Everything exactly as I'd left it, filmed from an angle near the front door like someone had been standing just inside the entrance. The video was silent, no movement, no sound, just a slow pan across the room, left to right, like whoever was holding the camera wanted me to see everything, to know they'd been there, to know they'd seen. My first thought was that someone was messing with me, a friend maybe, playing some kind of elaborate prank, but that didn't make sense. None of my friends had keys to my apartment. None of them would think this was funny. My second thought was that I'd somehow sent this to myself and forgotten about it. Like maybe I'd recorded something while half asleep and didn't remember. But I checked my camera roll. Nothing. No video like this anywhere on my phone. My third thought, the one that made my hands go cold and my heart start pounding, was that someone had been inside my apartment. Someone had walked through my front door, stood in my living room, and filmed it. And then they'd sent me the video from my own number. I got out of bed, walked through the apartment slowly, turning on every light, checking every room, the bathroom, the kitchen, the closet. I looked behind the shower curtain, looked under the bed, checked the locks on the front door, still bolted, chain still on, exactly as I'd left it. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was missing. There was no sign that anyone had been there. But I'd seen the video. I'd seen my apartment, filmed from an angle I'd never filmed it from, sent from a number that shouldn't have been able to send anything. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, phone clutched in my hand, listening to the radiator clank and the distant wail of a siren somewhere in the city. The apartment felt different now. The shadows in the corners seemed deeper. The silence between sounds seemed longer. I told myself there had to be an explanation, a rational, logical explanation. Someone was pranking me. Some technical glitch. Something. I didn't sleep that night. And the next morning, I received another video. This one came at 6:47 a.m. I know, because I was already awake, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink, staring at my phone like it might explode. When the notification popped up, another message from my own number, my whole body went rigid. I didn't want to open it. I sat there for maybe 5 minutes, just staring at the screen, my coffee going cold, the early morning light filtering gray and weak through the kitchen window. Outside, I could hear the garbage truck making its rounds, the hydraulic whine of the compactor, the shouts of the workers. Normal sounds, morning sounds. The world going on like nothing was wrong. I opened the video. This one was longer. 23 seconds. Same grainy quality, same low light, same silence. But this time, it wasn't my living room. It was my bedroom. The camera panned slowly across the space, my unmade bed, the pile of clothes on the chair I used as a hamper, my laptop still open on the desk, screen dark. And then it stopped, focused, on my nightstand, on my phone, charging on my nightstand. The same phone I was holding in my hands right now. I watched the video 3 times, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The angle was wrong. The angle was impossible. To get that shot, someone would have had to be standing at the foot of my bed while I was sleeping, while I was right there. I checked the timestamp on the video file, 3:12 a.m. I'd been home at 3:12 a.m. I'd been in that bed, asleep, vulnerable, and someone had been standing 3 feet away from me, filming. The first thing I did was call my phone carrier. I spent 45 minutes on hold, got transferred 3 times, and finally spoke to a customer service rep who sounded about as confused as I felt. She ran some checks, told me there was no record of any outgoing messages from my number at those times, and suggested maybe I'd been spoofed. When I asked what I should do about someone spoofing my number to send me videos of my own apartment, she didn't have an answer. The second thing I did was call the police. An officer came by around noon. Young guy, couldn't have been much older than me, with a notepad he never wrote anything in. I showed him the videos, explained the timeline, told him about the impossible angles, the timestamps, the fact that my doors were locked and nothing was disturbed. He watched the videos with a furrowed brow, then handed my phone back. "Could be someone messing with you," he said. "A friend, maybe, or some kind of hack. A hack that lets someone into my apartment." He shrugged. "You'd be surprised what people can do with phones these days. Deep fakes, video editing, all that stuff." He gave me his card. "If anything else happens, give us a call." That was it. That was all the help I got. I spent the rest of the day tearing my apartment apart. I checked every window, every lock, every possible point of entry. I looked for hidden cameras, in the smoke detectors, behind the bathroom mirror, inside the vents. I watched YouTube tutorials on how to find spy equipment. I downloaded an app that was supposed to detect hidden wireless signals. Nothing. I found nothing. That night, I didn't sleep in my bedroom. I dragged a blanket and pillow to the couch, positioned myself so I could see both the front door and the hallway to the bedroom. I kept every light in the apartment on. I kept my phone in my hand, volume turned all the way up, waiting. The video came at 4:08 a.m. I was still awake, barely, my eyes burning, my body exhausted but too wired to rest. When the notification buzzed, I nearly threw the phone across the room. My hands were shaking as I opened the message. This video was different. It started in the hallway outside my apartment. I recognized the ugly floral wallpaper, the scuffed baseboards, the door to the stairwell at the end of the corridor. The camera approached my door slowly, deliberately, stopped, lingered on the number, 2B, for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then the door opened, not dramatically, not with force, just opened, like someone had a key, like they belonged there. The video continued inside, living room, kitchen, hallway, bedroom. The same slow, methodical pan I'd seen before, but this time, at the very end, the camera turned toward the couch, toward me. It was dark, and the footage was grainy, but I could see myself. A shape on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. My back was to the camera. I was lying on my side, facing the cushions, completely unaware. The video held on that shot for 5 seconds, then it ended. Someone had been in my apartment that night, while I was awake, while I was right there on the couch, trying to stay alert. They'd walked past me, filmed me, and left without making a sound, and I hadn't heard a thing. I sat there in the gray light of dawn, staring at that final frame, the shape of my own body, oblivious, defenseless, and I felt something I'd never felt before. Not just fear, something deeper than fear. The complete, sickening realization that I was not in control, that someone could enter my space, stand inches away from me, and I would never know. The radiator clanked. Somewhere outside, a car horn blared. The world kept moving, indifferent to my terror. I needed to get out of that apartment. I knew that now. But something kept me frozen, kept me scrolling back through the videos, watching them over and over, searching for details I might have missed. And that's when I noticed it. In the second video, the one filmed in my bedroom at 3:12 a.m., there was a reflection in my laptop screen, faint, barely visible, the outline of a face. Someone had been standing right behind the camera, and they'd been smiling. I zoomed in on that reflection until my eyes ached, enhanced it with every app I could find, screenshotted it, adjusted the brightness, the contrast, the saturation. The image was too dark, too grainy, too distorted to make out any real features. Just the vague impression of a face, 2 dark spots where the eyes should be, and that curve at the bottom, that slight upward arc that could only be a mouth that was smiling. I showed the videos to my friend Marcus that afternoon. He was the only person I trusted enough to tell, the only person I thought might actually believe me. We'd known each other since undergrad, and he was the kind of guy who took things seriously, analytical, skeptical, but not dismissive. He watched all 3 videos without saying a word. When he finished, he set my phone down on the table between us and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on his face before, something between concern and fear. "Have you checked your phone for spyware?" he asked. I had. I'd run every scan, checked every app, looked through every permission setting. Nothing seemed out of place. "What about your apartment?" he pressed. "Hidden cameras, listening devices." I tore the place apart. "There's nothing." Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Then how are they getting in? You said your locks were intact. No signs of forced entry." That was the question that had been eating at me. The thing I couldn't explain no matter how many times I ran through the possibilities. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know how any of this is possible." He insisted on coming back to my apartment with me. We spent 2 hours going through everything again, every lock, every window, every square inch of wall and ceiling. Marcus checked the smoke detectors, unscrewed the light switch covers, even pulled the refrigerator away from the wall to look behind it. We found dust and dead bugs and a petrified slice of pizza I didn't remember losing. But no cameras, no microphones, no explanation. It was Marcus who finally found it. He was examining my front door, running his fingers along the frame, when he stopped, crouched down, squinted at something near the bottom of the door jamb. "Come here," he said. I knelt beside him, and he pointed to a tiny mark on the wood. A scratch, no bigger than a fingernail, right where the deadbolt met the frame. It looked fresh. The wood underneath was pale, exposed, not yet darkened by age or dirt. "Someone's been working on this," Marcus said quietly. "See how the strike plate is slightly loose?" He wiggled it with his finger. It moved. Not much, but enough. "They've been coming in through the front door, bypassing the lock somehow." My blood went cold. I'd checked that door 100 times. I'd checked the locks, the chain, everything. But I'd never thought to examine the frame itself. Never thought to look for signs that someone had been quietly, patiently compromising my security over time. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How long have they been doing this?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night, I didn't stay in the apartment. I packed a bag and went to Marcus's place, crashed on his couch, told myself I'd figure out next steps in the morning. I left every light on in my apartment, left the TV playing, wanted whoever was watching to think I was still there. I fell asleep around 2 a.m., exhausted beyond the point of fear. Marcus's apartment was warm and quiet, the sounds of the city muffled by distance. I felt safe for the first time in days. Safe enough to close my eyes, safe enough to let my guard down. At 5:15 a.m., my phone buzzed. I was awake instantly, heart slamming against my ribs, fumbling for the phone in the darkness. The notification glowed on the screen. A new message from my number. I opened it with numb fingers. The video was 12 seconds long. It showed Marcus's living room, Marcus's couch, me asleep on Marcus's couch, the blanket pulled up to my chin, completely unaware. They'd followed me. They knew where I'd gone, and they'd followed me, and they'd stood right there in Marcus's apartment while we were both asleep, and filmed me again. I woke Marcus up, showed him the video, watched the color drain from his face as he realized what it meant. "This isn't possible," he kept saying. "This isn't possible. My door was locked. I have a deadbolt. I have..." But it didn't matter. None of it mattered. Whoever was doing this, whatever they wanted, they could get in anywhere. They could follow me anywhere. There was no door strong enough, no lock secure enough, no distance far enough to keep them out. I felt like I was drowning, like the walls were closing in, like the air was getting thinner. I'd spent my whole life believing in logic, in rational explanations, in the basic safety of locked doors and predictable routines. And now all of that was crumbling. Someone was violating every boundary I had, and I couldn't stop them. I couldn't even see them. Marcus called the police. They came, took our statements, looked at the videos with the same confused skepticism I'd seen before. One officer suggested we were being pranked. Another asked if we'd checked for carbon monoxide leaks. Apparently that can cause hallucinations. They left without doing much of anything. That afternoon, I went back to my apartment alone. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I'd find something I'd missed. Maybe I just needed to see it again, to convince myself this was really happening. The door was unlocked when I got there. I knew I'd locked it when I left. I remembered the click of the deadbolt, the rattle of the chain. But now the door swung open at my touch, and inside, sitting in the middle of my coffee table where I couldn't possibly miss it, was my phone. Not the phone in my pocket, a second phone, identical to mine. Same case, same cracked corner, same everything. And on the screen, a message, "You left this behind." I didn't touch it at first. I just stood there, staring at that phone on my coffee table, my mind trying to process what I was seeing. It was identical to mine. Exactly identical. The same scuff marks on the case, the same hairline crack in the upper right corner of the screen from when I'd dropped it on the subway platform 6 months ago. But my phone was in my pocket. I could feel it there, solid and real, pressing against my thigh. I pulled it out, held it next to the one on the table. They were mirrors of each other. Same wallpaper, a photo I'd taken of the Chicago skyline last summer. Same apps arranged in the same positions, same notification badges, same everything. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped them both. I picked up the second phone. The screen was unlocked, open to the Messages app, and there, in a conversation thread with my own number, were all the videos, every single one they'd sent me. But there were more, so many more. I scrolled through them with numb fingers, my stomach turning with each thumbnail. Videos of me sleeping, videos of me eating breakfast, videos of me at my desk, headphones on, completely oblivious. Videos taken from angles I couldn't explain, from inside my closet, from behind my shower curtain, from underneath my bed, looking up at the mattress, sagging under my weight. They'd been watching me for weeks, maybe months, filming everything, documenting my life in ways I never could have imagined. And then I found the folder labeled Favorites. I shouldn't have opened it. I knew, even as my thumb hovered over it, that I shouldn't, but I couldn't stop myself. I needed to know. I needed to understand what kind of person could do this, what kind of mind could find pleasure in this violation. The folder contained dozens of photos, close-ups of my face while I slept, my hands on my keyboard, my feet on the floor, my toothbrush in the bathroom, my food in the refrigerator, intimate, mundane details of my existence, cataloged like specimens in a collection, and at the very end, a single video, 47 seconds long, time-stamped from 3 days ago. I pressed play. The video showed my bedroom at night. I was in bed, asleep, the blankets rising and falling with my breath. The camera was close, so close I could see the pores on my skin, the flutter of my eyelids, the slight part of my lips. And then a hand entered the frame. A pale hand, fingers slightly spread, reaching toward my face. It hovered there for a moment, inches from my cheek, trembling slightly, like whoever it belonged to was savoring the moment, anticipating. Then the hand pulled back. The camera shifted, and for one brief, terrible second, I saw a face reflected in my bedroom window. A woman, thin, pale, dark hair hanging lank around hollow cheeks, eyes that caught the faint light and seemed to glow with something I couldn't name. She was smiling, that same smile I'd seen in the laptop reflection, wide, unnatural, the smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. The video ended. I dropped the phone. It clattered against the coffee table, and I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet, slamming into the wall behind me. My chest was heaving. My vision was swimming. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could see was that face, that smile, that hand reaching for me in the dark. She'd touched me, or almost touched me. She'd been right there, close enough to feel my breath, and I'd never known. I'd slept through it. I'd slept through all of it. I ran. I didn't grab anything, didn't think about what I was doing, just bolted for the door, yanked it open, and sprinted down the hallway. The stairwell door banged against the wall as I shoved through it. I took the stairs 2 at a time, nearly falling, catching myself on the railing, my footsteps echoing in the concrete shaft. I burst out onto the street, late afternoon, gray sky. People walking past, bundled against the cold. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that a man was falling apart right in front of them. I called Marcus. My voice was shaking so badly he could barely understand me. I told him about the phone, the videos, the photos, the woman's face. "Get out of there," he said. "Don't go back. Come to my place. We'll figure this out." But I didn't move toward his apartment. Something made me turn around. Some instinct, some horrible pull I couldn't resist. I looked up at my building, up at the second floor, up at my window, and I saw her, standing in my living room, looking down at me through the glass. That same pale face, that same dark hair, that same smile. She raised one hand, slowly, deliberately, and waved. I don't remember screaming, but Marcus told me later that I did. I don't remember falling to my knees on the sidewalk, but that's where a stranger found me. A woman walking her dog, asking if I was okay, asking if I needed help. By the time the police arrived, my apartment was empty. No second phone, no woman, no evidence of anything I'd described. The officers looked at me like I was losing my mind. Maybe I was, but I know what I saw. I know what I found, and I know that somewhere, somehow, she was still watching. Because as I sat in the back of the patrol car, wrapped in a shock blanket someone had draped over my shoulders, my phone buzzed. A new message. From my own number. You looked so scared. It was beautiful. I never went back to that apartment. Not once. I sent Marcus to collect my things a week later, just the essentials, whatever he could fit in a few boxes. He said the place felt wrong when he was there. Cold, even though the radiator was running. Like something was watching him from the corners. He didn't stay long. I moved back to Ohio. Back to my parents' house. Back to my childhood bedroom with the faded posters on the walls and the twin bed I hadn't slept in since high school. I told my program I was taking a leave of absence for personal reasons. I don't know if I'll ever go back. The police investigated, if you can call it that. They dusted my apartment for prints, ran some kind of digital forensics on the videos I'd saved, interviewed my neighbors. Nobody had seen anything. Nobody had heard anything. The fingerprint results came back inconclusive. Too many partials. Too much contamination. The videos were untraceable, routed through servers that led nowhere. The second phone was never found. It had vanished along with her, like it had never existed at all. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined it. If I imagined all of it. But then I look at the videos still saved on my phone, the ones I couldn't bring myself to delete, and I know I didn't. I know she was real. I spent weeks trying to figure out who she was. I dug through every memory, every interaction, every passing encounter from my time in that city. Had I seen her before? On the street, in a coffee shop, on the train? Had we crossed paths somewhere, and I'd been too distracted to notice? Too absorbed in my own life to see the woman who was watching? I came up with nothing. She was a stranger. A complete stranger who had chosen me for reasons I'll never understand. Marcus helped me research. We looked into stalking patterns, obsessive behavior, cases similar to mine. We found a few. Stories of people being watched for months, sometimes years, before their stalkers made themselves known. Some of those stories ended badly. Some ended with restraining orders and therapy and a slow, painful return to normalcy. None of them ended with answers. None of them explained why. The messages stopped after I left the city. No more videos. No more texts from my own number. For a while, I let myself believe it was over. That distance had been enough. That she'd lost interest, moved on, found someone else to watch. But I don't really believe that. Some nights, I lie awake in my childhood bed, listening to the wind rattle the old windows, the house creaking and settling around me, and I think about her. I think about that smile, that wave, the way she'd cataloged my life like I was something to be collected, something to be owned. And I wonder if she's still out there, still watching, just from farther away. I changed my phone number, deleted all my social media, moved through the world like a ghost, trying to leave no trace, no trail for her to follow. But in the back of my mind, I know it probably doesn't matter. If she found me once, she can find me again. If she got into my apartment, into Marcus's apartment, without leaving a trace, then locks and distance and new phone numbers are just obstacles, just puzzles for her to solve. The worst part isn't the fear. I've learned to live with the fear. The worst part is the not knowing. Not knowing who she is, not knowing why she chose me, not knowing if she's watching me right now, through some camera I haven't found, some window I forgot to cover, some crack in my defenses I can't see. I check my phone obsessively now. Every notification makes my heart stutter. Every unknown number sends me into a spiral. I've become the paranoid person I never thought I'd be, the one who checks the locks 5 times before bed, who scans every room for things that don't belong, who looks over his shoulder on empty streets and sees threats in every shadow. My therapist says I have PTSD. She says it's a normal response to an abnormal situation. She says I need to work on reclaiming my sense of safety, rebuilding my trust in the world. I nod along in our sessions, say the right things, do the exercises she assigns. But I don't tell her the truth. I don't tell her that I'll never feel safe again, that safety was an illusion I used to believe in, and now I know better. Now I know that there are people out there who can slip through your locks, who can stand beside your bed while you sleep, who can document your entire existence without you ever knowing. And there's nothing you can do to stop them. Nothing except hope they lose interest. Hope they choose someone else. I still have the videos. I watch them sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep. I study them like they're evidence in a case I'm trying to solve. I look for clues I might have missed. I zoom in on that reflection, trying to see her face more clearly, trying to understand the person behind that smile. I never find anything new, but I keep looking. If you're reading this, I'm not telling you this story to scare you. I'm telling you because I need you to understand that the world is not as safe as you think it is. Your locks are not as strong as you believe. Your privacy is not as protected as you assume. There are people out there who see you, really see you, and you have no idea they exist. Pay attention. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And check your messages. Because right before I finished writing this, my phone buzzed. A new text. From a number I didn't recognize. Just 3 words. I found you. Story 3. A car followed me for 38 minutes, then vanished. There's something about driving alone at night that makes you feel invincible and vulnerable at the same time. Like you're sealed inside this little bubble of light and warmth, moving through the darkness, untouchable, but also completely alone, completely exposed. If something happened out there on those empty roads, no one would know, no one would see. I think about that a lot now. I didn't used to. This happened last November, right before Thanksgiving. I was 24, working as a shift supervisor at a restaurant about 40 minutes outside of town. The hours were brutal. I'd close most nights, which meant I wouldn't leave until 11, sometimes midnight, and then I'd have that long drive home through the back roads. I didn't mind it, honestly. I'd roll down the windows if it wasn't too cold, play music loud enough to keep me awake, let my brain decompress after hours of dealing with customers and cooks and teenage servers who couldn't figure out how to refill a water glass without spilling it. The route was always the same. Out of the restaurant parking lot, left onto Route 9, then about 15 miles of winding 2-lane road until I hit the highway interchange. From there, it was another 20 minutes to my apartment complex on the east side of town. I'd driven that route hundreds of times. I could have done it blindfolded. That night was cold. Not freezing, but that sharp, damp cold that seeps into your bones. There had been rain earlier in the evening. I remembered watching it streak down the restaurant windows during the dinner rush, but it had stopped by the time I clocked out. The roads were wet, reflecting my headlights back at me in long yellow smears. The sky was overcast, no moon, no stars, just blackness pressing down from above. I remember being tired. Not dangerously tired, but that heavy end-of-shift exhaustion that settles into your muscles and makes everything feel slightly muted. I had the heat cranked up, some podcast playing through my phone, true crime, ironically. And I was thinking about nothing in particular. What I'd eat when I got home, whether I'd bother showering or just collapse into bed. The small, meaningless thoughts that fill your head when you're running on autopilot. I didn't notice the headlights at first. On Route 9, there's usually at least a few other cars, even late at night. People heading home from the bars, truckers taking shortcuts, kids driving around because they had nothing better to do. A pair of headlights in my rearview mirror wasn't unusual, wasn't noteworthy. But at some point, I couldn't tell you exactly when, I became aware of them. Not in a conscious way, more like a background awareness. Those headlights had been there for a while. They'd been there when I turned onto Route 9. They'd been there through the first few curves. They were still there now, maybe 100 feet back, maintaining the same distance. I glanced at the rearview mirror, squinting against the glare. The headlights were bright, too bright, probably high beams, but I couldn't make out anything about the car behind them. Just two white circles floating in the darkness, keeping pace. I told myself it was nothing. Same road, same direction, probably just someone else heading toward the highway. I'd make my turn, they'd keep going straight, and that would be the end of it. But I was coming up on Miller's Creek Road, where I usually turned to cut through the farmland and shave 5 minutes off my drive. It wasn't the main route. Most people didn't know about it. If I turned there and the car followed, that would mean something. That would be weird. I put on my blinker, slowed down, turned onto Miller's Creek. The headlights turned too. My stomach did a little flip, but I pushed the feeling down. Coincidence. Maybe they lived out here. There were a few houses scattered along this road, a couple of farms. It didn't mean anything. Miller's Creek Road was darker than Route 9. No streetlights, no houses for the first mile or so. Just fields on either side, the skeletal outlines of bare trees against the cloudy sky, and those headlights in my mirror. Steady, unwavering. The same distance behind me as before. I sped up a little. Not dramatically. I didn't want to seem like I was panicking over nothing, but enough that a normal driver would fall back. The headlights sped up too. That's when the first real tendril of fear curled through my chest. That's when I stopped telling myself it was nothing. I checked the clock on my dashboard. 11:47 p.m. I remember that specifically because I thought, okay, I'm going to time this. I'm going to see how long they stay behind me. I didn't know yet that I'd be counting minutes for the next 38 of them. I didn't know yet that those headlights would follow me through every turn, every road, every desperate attempt to lose them. And I didn't know that when they finally vanished, it would be worse than if they'd stayed. The first thing I did was slow down. Not brake, just eased off the gas, let my speed drop from 45 to 35, then 30. If this was just some random driver behind me, they'd get impatient. They'd pass me or back off. That's what normal people do. The headlights slowed too, maintained that same distance, maybe 100 feet, maybe less. My heart started beating faster. I could feel it in my throat, this thick, uncomfortable pulse that made it hard to swallow. I told myself to stay calm, stay rational. There could still be an innocent explanation. Maybe they were nervous about passing on a dark road. Maybe they were lost, following me because they thought I knew where I was going. But the rationalizations felt thin, paper thin, and getting thinner with every mile. I sped up again. 40, 45, 50, faster than I should have been going on that road, especially with the wet pavement, the curves I knew were coming. The headlights matched my speed exactly. Not closing the gap, not falling behind, just keeping pace. I grabbed my phone from the cup holder, thought about calling someone, my roommate, my mom, 911. But what would I say? There's a car behind me on a public road. I'm scared because someone is driving in the same direction as me. I'd sound paranoid, hysterical, and by the time anyone could help, I'd either be home safe or... I didn't let myself finish that thought. Miller's Creek Road ended at a T intersection. Left would take me toward the highway, my normal route. Right led deeper into farmland, eventually looping back to Route 9 about 10 miles north. Nobody went that way unless they lived out there. I turned right. The headlights turned right. Okay, I said out loud, just to hear something besides my own heartbeat and the hum of the engine. Okay, this is happening. I don't know why saying it made it feel more real, more manageable somehow, like acknowledging the situation gave me permission to take it seriously. The clock on my dashboard read 11:53, 6 minutes since I'd started counting. The road narrowed as I drove deeper into the farmland. No more center line, just crumbling asphalt barely wide enough for 2 cars to pass. The fields on either side were empty, harvested months ago, nothing but stubble and mud stretching into the darkness. Occasionally, I'd pass a farmhouse set back from the road, windows dark, no signs of life, no help. I tried another test, pulled onto the shoulder, slowed to a near stop like I was checking my phone or looking for an address. A normal driver would pass me, would at least slow down and ask if I was okay. The headlights stopped too, sat there on the road behind me, engine idling, waiting for me to move. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. That cold sweat feeling was prickling across my back, under my arms, at the nape of my neck. I could hear my breath coming faster, shorter, fogging slightly in the air, even with the heat blasting. I pulled back onto the road, started driving again. The headlights followed. 12 minutes now. I called my roommate. She picked up on the fourth ring, voice thick with sleep. "Jenna, what time is it?" "I think someone's following me." The words tumbled out in a rush. "There's a car behind me. They've been behind me for like 15 minutes. They turn when I turn. They slow down when I slow down. I don't know what to do." I heard rustling, like she was sitting up in bed. "Are you serious? Where are you?" "Out past Miller's Creek, in the middle of nowhere." "Can you see who it is? The license plate?" I glanced in the rearview mirror, just those headlights, blinding and featureless. "No, their brights are on. I can't see anything." "Go somewhere public. A gas station, a police station, anywhere with people." "There's nothing out here, Ray. It's all farms." "Then drive to one. Pull up to a house, honk your horn, make noise. Someone will come out." She was right. That was smart. I scanned the darkness ahead, looking for any sign of life. A porch light, a lit window, anything. The road stretched on, empty and black, the fields on either side offering nothing. And then, up ahead on the left, I saw it. A farmhouse with lights on downstairs, a truck in the driveway. Someone was home. "I see a house," I told Ray. "I'm going to pull in. Stay on the phone with me. Don't hang up." I slowed down, put on my blinker. The driveway was maybe 50 feet ahead. I could pull in, lay on the horn, pray that whoever lived there was the kind of person who helped strangers in trouble. The headlights behind me flashed. Once, twice, 3 times. Like a warning, like a message. I pulled into the driveway anyway, stopped right behind the truck, hand hovering over the horn, ready to... The car drove past, slowly, so slowly. I could hear the crunch of its tires on the wet asphalt, the low growl of its engine. But I still couldn't see it clearly. Just a dark shape sliding by, those headlights sweeping across the farmhouse before disappearing around a curve in the road. "They're gone," I breathed into the phone. "They just drove past." "Oh, thank God. Are you okay?" I sat there in that stranger's driveway, shaking, staring at the empty road. The clock read 12:02 a.m., 15 minutes of terror, and now, nothing. But something didn't feel right. Something felt wrong about the way they'd just given up. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. The farmhouse door never opened. Maybe they hadn't heard me pull in. Maybe they were heavy sleepers. The road stayed empty. Finally, I backed out of the driveway and started toward home. Ray stayed on the phone with me, talking about nothing, keeping me calm. I made it about 2 miles before I saw them again. The headlights, in my rearview mirror, same distance, same pace. They'd been waiting for me. Jenna, what's wrong?" I couldn't answer Ray at first. My voice had locked up somewhere in my throat, trapped behind a wall of pure animal terror. The headlights were back, the same distance, the same steady pace. Like the last 15 minutes had been a game, and I'd played right into their hands. "They're back," I finally managed. "Oh my God, Ray, they're back. They were waiting. They pulled off somewhere and waited for me." I heard her sharp intake of breath. "Call 911, right now. I'm staying on the line, but call them." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely navigate to the emergency dial screen. I fumbled with my phone, nearly dropped it, finally managed to press the numbers. It rang once, twice. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's following me. The words came out high and thin, barely recognizable as my own voice. I'm on County Road 12, I think, past Miller's Creek. There's a car that's been following me for... I glanced at the clock. 20 minutes. They won't stop. They pulled off and waited for me, and now they're following me again. Okay, ma'am. I need you to stay calm. Can you describe the vehicle? I can't see it. Their high beams are on. It's just headlights. I can't... My voice cracked. Please, I don't know what to do. Can you make it to the police station on Thornwood Avenue? That's the closest. I don't know where that is. I'm not from here. I just work out here. I don't know these roads. Okay. The dispatcher's voice was steady, professional, calm in a way that felt almost offensive, given my situation. I'm going to send a unit to your location. Stay on the line with me. Do not stop your vehicle. Do not pull over. Just keep driving. I pressed the gas harder. The speedometer climbed. 50, 55, 60. Too fast for this road. Too fast for the curves and the wet pavement and the complete absence of streetlights. But I didn't care. I just needed distance. I needed those headlights to shrink in my mirror, to fall behind, to give up. They matched my speed. Of course they did. They're speeding up, I told the dispatcher. They're staying right behind me. How far behind? I don't know. 50 feet? Maybe less? Can you see any other vehicles on the road? Anyone who might be able to help? I scanned the darkness ahead, the darkness behind. Nothing. Just empty fields and bare trees and that single pair of headlights burning holes in my rearview mirror. There's no one. There's no one out here. I heard her typing, murmuring to someone else. Then she was back. A unit is en route. They're about 12 minutes out. Can you keep driving? 12 minutes. It felt like a lifetime. It felt like a death sentence. The road curved sharply to the left, and I took it too fast. My tires skidded on the wet pavement, the back end of my car fishtailing before I managed to correct. My heart slammed against my ribs. For a second, I thought I was going to lose control, spin off into a ditch, and then it wouldn't matter if the police were 12 minutes away or 12 seconds. The headlights took the curve smoothly, effortlessly, like they knew these roads, like they'd done this before. And then they started getting closer. They're gaining on me. I could hear the hysteria creeping into my voice. They're getting closer. Stay calm, ma'am. Keep driving. Do not stop. But they were closing the gap. 50 feet became 40. 40 became 30. I could see more of the car now. Not clearly, not enough to identify, but the shape of it. A sedan, I thought. Dark-colored. Maybe black, maybe blue. The headlights were so bright they washed everything else out. 20 feet. I could hear their engine now, growling behind mine. I could see the outline of someone in the driver's seat, just a silhouette, featureless and dark. They're right behind me. They're right on me. Oh God, oh God. The car surged forward. For one horrible moment, I thought they were going to ram me. I braced for the impact, my whole body tensing, a scream building in my chest. But they swerved, pulled into the oncoming lane, drew up alongside me. I looked over. I couldn't help it. I had to see. The windows were tinted too dark to see through, just black glass reflecting my own headlights back at me. But the driver's window was cracked, just an inch or two, and through that gap, I could see movement. Someone leaning toward the opening. And then I heard it, clear and unmistakable over the roar of both engines. Laughter, low, rumbling laughter, the kind that comes from the chest, the kind that says, I'm enjoying this, I'm having fun. The car dropped back, fell behind me again, returned to that steady distance, those headlights boring into my mirror like eyes. Ma'am, Ma'am, are you still there? They pulled up next to me, I whispered. They laughed at me. They're playing with me. The dispatcher went quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, like she'd finally understood what was happening. The unit is 8 minutes out. You're doing great. Just keep driving. 8 minutes. The clock on my dashboard read 12:17. I'd been running for 30 minutes. I didn't know if I had 8 more minutes left in me. I didn't know if I had 8 more seconds. But I kept driving. What else could I do? The headlights followed, patient, relentless, waiting for whatever came next. The next 8 minutes were the longest of my life. I drove with my hands locked on the steering wheel, knuckles white, arms aching from the tension. The dispatcher stayed on the line, her voice a thin tether to reality, but I barely heard what she was saying. All my attention was fixed on that rearview mirror, on those headlights, on the dark shape of the car that had been hunting me for over half an hour. 32 minutes. The road straightened out, and I pushed my speed up to 70. The engine whined in protest. The car behind me matched pace effortlessly, like we were connected by an invisible cord. Ma'am, the unit is about 4 minutes out. They're coming from the north on County Road 12. You should see them soon. 4 minutes. I could do 4 minutes. I could survive 4 more minutes. 34 minutes. The headlights flashed again. Once, twice, 3 times. The same pattern as before, when I'd pulled into that farmhouse driveway. A signal, a message I couldn't decode. And then they started getting closer again. They're coming up on me again, I said, my voice cracking. Why do they keep doing this? 40 feet, 30, 20. I could see the car clearly now. A sedan, dark blue or black, older model. The kind of car that blends in anywhere, that you wouldn't look twice at in a parking lot. The tint on the windows was so dark it looked like the car was filled with shadow. 15 feet. 10. They were right on my bumper. So close I could have counted the bugs splattered on their hood if there'd been enough light. So close that if I tapped my brakes, they'd slam into me. They're going to hit me. They're going to... The car swerved into the oncoming lane again, drew up beside me, matched my speed exactly. I didn't want to look. Every instinct told me to keep my eyes forward, to focus on the road, to not give them the satisfaction. But my head turned anyway, pulled by some horrible gravity. The driver's window was down now, all the way down, and in the darkness of that window, I saw a face. Pale, male, middle-aged, maybe older. Features I couldn't quite make out, washed in shadow and the glow of my own dashboard lights. But I could see his eyes, reflecting the light like a cat's eyes, fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. He was smiling, this wide, stretched smile that showed too many teeth. The smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment, savoring it. He raised one hand from the steering wheel, slowly, deliberately, and he pointed at me, just pointed. Index finger extended, aimed right at my face like a gun, holding it there, letting me see. Then he mouthed something. I couldn't hear it over the roar of the engines, but I could read his lips. 2 words. Found you. The car dropped back, fell behind me. The headlights receded, 50 feet, 100 feet, further and further until they were just pinpricks in my mirror, and then they turned off. Not turned away, turned off. The headlights went dark, and the car that had been hunting me for 36 minutes, vanished into the blackness like it had never existed. I screamed. I couldn't help it. The sound ripped out of me, raw and primal, filling the car, because somehow this was worse. This was so much worse than being followed. At least when they were behind me, I knew where they were. Now they could be anywhere. They could have pulled off onto a side road. They could have cut their lights and kept following in the darkness. They could be right behind me, and I wouldn't know. Ma'am, What happened? They're gone, I sobbed. They turned off their lights and they're gone. I can't see them. I don't know where they went. Stay on the line. The unit is less than 2 minutes out. Keep driving. 38 minutes. That's how long it had lasted. 38 minutes of terror, and then they just disappeared. I drove the last 2 minutes in a state of blind panic, checking my mirrors every few seconds, seeing nothing but darkness. The road behind me was empty. The road ahead was empty. I was alone in a way that felt more dangerous than being followed. And then I saw them, red and blue lights, flashing in the distance, coming toward me. The police. I pulled over immediately, didn't even make it all the way onto the shoulder before I threw the car into park and started crying. Deep, ugly sobs that shook my whole body. The relief was overwhelming, but underneath it, there was something else, something cold and unfinished. The officer who approached my window was a woman, maybe 40, with a kind face and tired eyes. She asked me if I was okay, asked me to describe what happened. I told her everything, the headlights, the following, the laughter, the face, those 2 words. Found you. She wrote it all down, told me they'd searched the area, checked for vehicles matching my description, told me I'd done the right thing by calling, but I could see it in her eyes, the doubt, the uncertainty. A car that followed someone for 38 minutes and then vanished without a trace. No license plate, no clear description, no evidence. It sounded crazy. I knew it sounded crazy. She followed me the rest of the way home, walked me to my apartment door, gave me her card and told me to call if anything else happened. I locked the door behind me, checked the windows, checked them again, and then I sat on my couch in the dark, staring at nothing, waiting for morning. Because somewhere out there, on those empty roads, someone had spent 38 minutes hunting me. And I had no idea why. The police never found them. They searched the area that night, County Road 12, Miller's Creek, all the back roads I'd driven through. Nothing. No dark sedan, no suspicious vehicles, no one who matched the description I'd given. It was like the car had dissolved into the night, swallowed by the same darkness it had emerged from. Over the next few days, they followed up, checked traffic cameras on the nearby highways. There weren't many, but they checked the ones that existed, looked for any similar reports in the area, came up empty on all fronts. The officer who'd escorted me home, her name was Martinez, called me about a week later. She was kind about it, but I could hear the resignation in her voice. Without a license plate, without a clear description of the driver, without any physical evidence, there was nothing more they could do. The case would stay open, technically, but I understood what that meant. It meant it would sit in a file somewhere, untouched, until everyone forgot about it. Everyone except me. I quit my job at the restaurant. I know that sounds dramatic. I know it sounds like I let them win, whoever they were. But I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't face that drive every night, those empty roads, the darkness pressing in from all sides. The first time I tried to go back, I made it about 5 miles before I had to pull over because I was shaking too hard to steer. A pair of headlights appeared behind me, just a normal car, just someone driving home, and I completely fell apart. Sat on the side of the road hyperventilating until they passed. I found a new job closer to home. Retail, worse pay, worse hours, but I could take main roads the whole way. Roads with streetlights and other cars and the constant presence of witnesses. I haven't driven on a back road at night since that November. Ray moved in with me for a few weeks after it happened. She didn't ask, didn't make me explain, just showed up with a suitcase and said she was staying until I felt safe again. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe again, but I didn't tell her that. I just let her sleep on my couch and pretended that having another person in the apartment made the fear go away. It didn't, but it helped. I started seeing a therapist in January. She diagnosed me with acute stress disorder that was at risk of developing into PTSD. We talk about coping strategies, grounding techniques, ways to manage the panic attacks that still hit me sometimes when I'm driving alone. She says I'm making progress. She says the fear will fade with time. But she doesn't know about the things I haven't told her. She doesn't know that I've started noticing a dark sedan parked on my street sometimes. Different spots, different times of day. It's never there for long, an hour, maybe two, and then it's gone. I've never seen anyone get in or out. I've never been able to read the license plate. It's probably nothing. Probably just a neighbor's car, or someone visiting a friend, or any one of 1,000 innocent explanations. I know that. I tell myself that every time I see it, but I also remember those two words, that pale face in the darkness, that stretched, horrible smile. Found you, not got you, not caught you. Found. Like finding me was the point. Like the chase, the terror, the 38 minutes of hunting. All of it was just a way to locate me, to mark me, to let me know that they could find me whenever they wanted. I don't know who they were. I don't know why they chose me. Maybe it was random, wrong place, wrong time, just a woman driving alone on an empty road. Maybe I was just entertainment, a toy to play with until they got bored. Or maybe it was something else. Maybe they'd been watching me before that night. Maybe they knew my route, my schedule, my habits. Maybe they'd been planning it for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. I'll never know. That's the part that eats at me, the not knowing, the questions that circle endlessly in my mind at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep, and every sound outside my window makes my heart race. What did they want? Why did they stop? Why did they let me go? And the question that scares me most, are they done with me, or are they just waiting? I'm writing this because I need people to understand that this happens. It happens to normal people on normal nights, and there's no reason, no explanation, no satisfying ending where the bad guy gets caught and everyone learns a lesson. Sometimes evil just exists. Sometimes it finds you on an empty road, follows you for 38 minutes, and then vanishes like smoke. If you're reading this and you ever find yourself being followed, don't rationalize it. Don't tell yourself it's nothing. Don't worry about seeming paranoid or dramatic. Call the police. Drive to a station, a hospital, a fire department, anywhere with people and lights. Don't go home. Don't let them know where you live. Trust your gut. It knows things your brain doesn't want to admit. And if you ever see a dark sedan in your rearview mirror, hanging back just far enough to seem like coincidence, keeping pace no matter how fast you drive, don't slow down. Don't pull over. And whatever you do, don't look at the driver's window. Because if you see that smile, that wide, stretched, too many teeth smile, you'll know exactly what I mean when I say some things are worse than being followed. Some things stay with you forever. It's been almost a year now. I still check my mirrors constantly. Still feel my pulse spike whenever I see headlights behind me at night. Still wake up sometimes in a cold sweat, dreaming about that face, that pointing finger, those two words. And sometimes, when I'm driving home from work on those well-lit, busy roads I've chosen so carefully, I swear I see it. A dark sedan, 3 cars back, keeping pace. By the time I look again, it's always gone. But I know what I saw, and I know, somewhere deep in my bones, that 38 minutes was just the beginning. Story 4. The night shift janitor who avoided one room. I took the job because it paid $12 an hour to be alone. That's how I thought of it. Not cleaning, not mopping, not emptying trash cans at 2 a.m. Just being alone in a quiet building while the rest of the world slept. For a 21-year-old trying to scrape through his last year of college without drowning in debt, it sounded perfect. The building was a 7-story office complex on the outskirts of downtown, one of those glass and steel boxes that housed insurance companies and accounting firms during the day and turned into a ghost town after 6 p.m. I'd driven past it 100 times without ever really seeing it. That's the thing about places like that. They're designed to be forgettable. Just another rectangle on the skyline. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights a week. The interview was a joke. The facilities manager, a tired-looking woman named Deborah, asked me maybe 3 questions, glanced at my application, and told me I could start Monday. They were desperate, I realized later. The last guy had quit without notice, and the guy before him hadn't lasted a month. I didn't ask why. I should have. My first night, I trained with a man named Earl. He was in his 60s, black, built like he'd spent decades doing physical labor, with gray stubble and hands that looked like they'd seen some things. He'd worked in that building for almost 15 years, he told me. Started as a day porter, moved to nights when his wife passed because he couldn't stand being home alone in the dark. Earl was patient, methodical. He walked me through everything: the supply closets, the floor plans, the break room where we could heat up food, the security desk where a guard named Terrence would nod at us and go back to watching his little TV. He showed me how to use the industrial vacuum, how to mix the cleaning solutions, how to lock up behind myself when I moved between floors. The building was eerie at night, I'll admit. All those empty cubicles, the dark computer screens reflecting my flashlight, the way sound traveled wrong in the hallways, footsteps echoing from directions that didn't make sense. But Earl moved through it all like it was nothing, like the emptiness was an old friend. "You get used to it," he said, catching me glancing over my shoulder at nothing. "First few weeks, every shadow looks like something. After that, you stop seeing them." I wasn't sure if that was comforting or not. We worked our way up through the building, floor by floor. Earl had a system: bathrooms first, then common areas, then individual offices. He was particular about the order, almost ritualistic. I figured it was just habit, the way longtime workers develop routines they can't explain. It wasn't until we reached the 6th floor that something changed. The 6th floor was laid out like all the others: central elevator bank, hallways branching off in both directions, offices lining the outer walls. We started at one end and worked our way down, Earl pushing his cart, me trailing behind with the mop bucket. It was quiet up there, quieter than the other floors, somehow. The hum of the ventilation seemed muted. The fluorescent lights buzzed at a lower frequency, casting everything in that flat, institutional glow. We passed door after door. Most of them had little nameplates: Johnson, Patel, Accounting Services, Conference Room 6A. I wasn't really reading them, just noting them as we passed, falling into the rhythm. And then Earl stopped. He didn't say anything. Just stopped, his cart halting in the middle of the hallway, his eyes fixed straight ahead. I almost bumped into him. "Earl, you good?" "We skipped this one," he said. I followed his gaze. We were standing in front of a door like any other. Plain wood, small window set into the upper half, standard brass handle, but there was no nameplate. Just a small metal placard that read 6B. "Skip it," I repeated. "Like, we don't clean it?" "Management handles it." His voice was flat, final. I waited for more, an explanation, a joke, something. But Earl just started walking again, pushing his cart past room 6B like it didn't exist, like we hadn't stopped at all. I caught up to him a few seconds later. "Is it storage or something? Hazardous materials?" "Something like that. So we don't clean it." He looked at me then, and something in his expression made my next question die in my throat. It wasn't anger. It wasn't annoyance. It was something closer to warning. "You work here long enough, you learn there's some things that ain't worth asking about. Room 6B is one of them." We finished the 6th floor in silence. Earl's earlier warmth had evaporated, replaced by something stiff and guarded. I wanted to push, to ask more questions, but the look in his eyes kept me quiet. When we passed room 6B on our way back to the elevator, I glanced at the door. Just a quick look, almost involuntary. The window was dark, not just unlit, dark, like the glass was swallowing light instead of letting it through, and Earl didn't look at it. He kept his eyes straight ahead, his jaw tight, his pace just slightly faster than before. Like he was trying to get past it as quickly as possible. Like he was afraid of what might happen if he stopped. I didn't ask any more questions that night, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. A room that no one cleaned. A room that management handled. A room that made a 60-year-old man with 15 years in this building walk faster and refuse to meet my eyes. What the hell was in room 6B? I'd find out eventually. That's the thing about questions like that. They don't let you go. They sit in the back of your mind, scratching at your thoughts until you do something stupid. And I did something very, very stupid. For the first 2 weeks, I followed Earl's lead. We cleaned every floor, skipped room 6B, and I didn't say another word about it. I told myself it wasn't my business. Told myself there was probably some boring explanation, asbestos abatement, ongoing renovation, a water leak that had made the floor unsafe, the kind of mundane reality that makes ghost stories fall apart. But I couldn't stop noticing things, like the way Earl's whole demeanor changed when we reached the 6th floor. On every other level, he'd chat with me about sports, about his grandkids, about the best diners to hit after a night shift. But the moment we stepped off the elevator onto 6, he went quiet, focused. His movements got quicker, more efficient, like he wanted to finish and get out as fast as possible. And he never, ever looked at room 6B, not once. Not a glance, not a side eye, not even that involuntary flick of attention you give to something unusual. It was like the door didn't exist for him, like he'd trained himself over 15 years to erase it from his vision. I started paying closer attention to the door itself, from a distance at first, just noting it as we passed, the way the hallway light seemed dimmer around it. Then I started lingering a little, slowing my pace, letting Earl get ahead of me so I could look without him seeing. The door looked normal, that was the thing. Plain wood, brass handle, that little window at the top. But the window was always dark. Not just dark, like an unlit room. Dark like something was covering it from the inside. Like black paint or thick fabric, or something I didn't want to think about too hard. One night, around my 3rd week, I worked up the nerve to touch the door. Just a quick brush of my fingers against the wood as I walked past. Nothing dramatic. The wood was cold. Not cool the way you'd expect from an empty office at night. Cold. The kind of cold that seeps into your fingertips and makes you pull back on instinct. I yanked my hand away and kept walking, heart beating faster than it should have been. Earl was waiting by the elevator. He didn't say anything. But he looked at me, and I knew. He knew exactly what I'd done. "Curiosity's a dangerous thing in this building," he said as the elevator doors closed. I laughed, trying to play it off. "It's just a door, man." Earl didn't laugh. I thought so too, once. He didn't explain what he meant. He never explained anything about room 6B. But that night, after our shift ended, he pulled me aside in the parking lot. "You seem like a good kid," he said. "Smart, got a future ahead of you. So I'm gonna give you some advice, and I need you to hear me. Really hear me." I nodded, suddenly aware of how dark the parking lot was. How empty. The building loomed behind us, 7 stories of black glass reflecting the streetlights. "Don't go in that room. Don't open that door. Don't even look through that window if you can help it. I know it don't make sense. I know you got questions. But some questions ain't worth the answers." "Earl, come on. I'm serious." His voice dropped, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw something like fear in his eyes. The last 3 people who worked your position, before you, before the guy who quit, before the guy who didn't last a month, they all got curious. They all wanted to know what was in that room. And they're gone. He held my gaze. One quit without notice. One just stopped showing up. And one they found in his car, 3 blocks from here, just sitting there, engine running, eyes wide open, wouldn't talk for a week. My mouth went dry. What happened to him? Nobody knows. He wouldn't say. Still won't. He's in a facility now, up in Briar Ridge. His family visits. But he don't talk to them. Don't talk to anyone. Earl shook his head slowly. Whatever he saw in that room, it broke something in him. Something that don't get fixed. I wanted to laugh it off. Wanted to tell him he was messing with me, hazing the new guy, spinning some urban legend to see if I'd bite. But the look on his face was too real. The tremor in his voice was too genuine. "What's in there, Earl? Seriously, what do you think it is?" He was quiet for a long moment. The wind picked up, rattling a chain-link fence somewhere nearby, sending a paper cup skittering across the asphalt. "I don't know," he finally said, "and I plan on dying without finding out." He walked to his car after that. I watched him go, this man who'd spent 15 years in that building, who knew every corner and closet and stairwell, and who refused to acknowledge one single room. I should have listened to him. I should have taken his advice and finished out the semester and found a different job. That's what a smart person would have done. But the problem with warnings like that, the more someone tells you not to look, the more you want to see. It took me 3 more weeks to do it. 3 weeks of walking past that door every night, feeling that cold radiating off the wood, seeing that black window that never showed anything. 3 weeks of wondering, imagining, dreaming about what might be behind it. On a Tuesday in early November, Earl called in sick. First time in years he told me over the phone. Food poisoning, he thought. He'd be back the next night, which meant I was alone in the building. Just me, the empty offices, and room 6B. I told myself I wouldn't do it. I told myself I'd stick to the routine, skip the room, finish my shift like a professional. But by 2 a.m., I was standing in front of that door. My master key was in my hand, and the window, for the first time, wasn't completely dark. There was a light inside, faint, flickering, like a candle, like someone was waiting for me. I stood there for what felt like hours. It was probably only a minute, maybe 2, but time had gone strange. The hallway felt longer than it should have been. The fluorescent lights overhead seemed dimmer, their buzz lower, like the building itself was holding its breath. The light behind the window flickered again, soft, warm, almost inviting. I pressed my face to the glass before I could stop myself. The window was cold against my forehead, that same unnatural cold I'd felt when I touched the door. My breath fogged the glass, and I wiped it away with my sleeve. At first, I couldn't see anything, just that faint glow, sourceless and diffuse, like the room itself was lit from within. Then my eyes adjusted, and I started to make out shapes, a desk, a chair, filing cabinets against the wall. It looked like any other office in the building, mundane, unremarkable. I almost laughed. All that build-up, all that fear, and it was just a regular room. Earl had been messing with me. The whole thing was some elaborate hazing ritual for new hires. Then I saw the photographs. They covered every inch of the walls. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, overlapping and layered so densely that I couldn't see the paint beneath. All of them were the same size, small, like passport photos or old Polaroids. And all of them were faces. I squinted, trying to make out details. Men, women, children. All ages, all races. Some were smiling, some were crying, some had their eyes closed, and some were looking directly at the camera with expressions I didn't have words for. Expressions that made my stomach turn and my skin crawl. I pulled back from the window. My heart was pounding now, that thick, uncomfortable pulse I'd come to recognize as genuine fear. This wasn't a storage room. This wasn't a hazmat situation. This was something else. Something wrong. I should have walked away. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to leave, to go back downstairs, to call Earl or Deborah or anyone. but my hand was already moving toward the door handle, already fitting the master key into the lock. The lock clicked open. The door swung inward, silent on its hinges, and a wave of cold air washed over me. Not cold like air conditioning, cold like a freezer, cold like a morgue. It stung my eyes and made my breath come out in white clouds. I stepped inside. The room was bigger than it should have been. I know how that sounds, but I'd cleaned every other office on this floor. I knew their dimensions, their layouts. Room 6B should have been the same size as 6A next door. But standing inside it, I felt like I'd walked into a space that didn't obey the same rules. The photographs were everywhere, just like I'd seen through the window. Up close, they were worse. So much worse. Some of them were clearly old, sepia-toned, cracked, edges curling. Others looked recent, printed on glossy paper. But they all had the same quality, the same energy. The people in them looked taken. That's the only word I can think of. Not photographed. Taken. Captured. And their eyes followed me. I know that's a cliche. I know everyone says that about creepy pictures. But I mean it literally. As I moved through the room, the eyes in those photographs tracked my movement. Not all of them at once. That would have been almost bearable. Just one or two at a time. A subtle shift, a flicker of motion in my peripheral vision. When I looked directly at them, they were still, frozen, just photographs. But when I looked away, they moved. In the center of the room, where a desk should have been, there was something else. A chair, old and wooden, facing the far wall, and sitting in that chair. I stopped breathing. There was a figure in the chair. A person, or something shaped like a person, facing away from me. I could see the back of their head, thin, gray hair, patchy and unkempt, narrow shoulders draped in something dark, hands resting on the armrests, fingers long and pale. They weren't moving, weren't breathing, just sitting there, perfectly still. "Hello," my voice came out cracked, barely a whisper. No response. I took a step closer, then another. The cold was intense now, so cold it hurt to breathe. The photographs on the walls seemed to lean inward, like they were watching, waiting. I was close enough to touch the chair when the figure spoke. "You shouldn't be here." The voice was wrong. Not wrong like an accent or a speech impediment. Wrong like it was coming from everywhere at once. From the walls, from the photographs, from inside my own head. It vibrated through my chest and made my teeth ache. "I'm sorry," I stammered. I work here. I'm the janitor. I didn't mean to." "They all say that." The figure still hadn't moved, still hadn't turned around. "They all come looking. They all find me. And then they stay." The photographs on the walls rustled, like a wind was moving through them, except there was no wind. Just that impossible cold and that terrible voice and the growing certainty that I had made the worst mistake of my life. "I'll leave," I said. "I'm leaving right now." I turned toward the door. The door was gone. Where the doorway had been, there was just wall now. Wall covered in photographs. And in the center of that wall, where the window should have been, a new photograph, fresh, still developing. It was my face, staring back at me with wide, terrified eyes, the exact expression I was wearing right now. Behind me, I heard the chair creak. The figure was standing, and slowly, impossibly slowly, it was starting to turn around. I couldn't move. Every muscle in my body had locked up, frozen by something deeper than cold. The figure rose from the chair in a way that didn't look human. No shifting of weight, no bracing of arms. It simply unfolded, like paper being straightened, until it stood facing the far wall. Then it began to turn. I watched the profile emerge, the curve of a jaw, sunken and hollow. the ridge of a cheekbone pressing against skin that looked like wet paper. A nose, sharp and angular, casting a shadow that seemed too long for the light in the room. I didn't want to see the face. Every cell in my body was screaming that I couldn't see the face, that if I saw what was beneath that thin gray hair, something inside me would break, something that couldn't be put back together. I squeezed my eyes shut. Open them. The voice wasn't a request. It was a command that bypassed my brain entirely, sent straight to my muscles, my nerves, my disobedient body. My eyelids twitched, fluttered, started to lift against my will. And then I heard it. Distant, muffled, but unmistakable. The elevator. The soft ding of the doors opening. The hum of the motor. Someone was on the 6th floor. The room shuddered. The photographs on the walls rippled like water disturbed by a stone. The figure stopped mid-turn, its profile still visible, that horrible, almost face hovering at the edge of my vision. "Earl?" I shouted. My voice was raw, desperate. "Earl, I'm in here. I'm in 6B." The cold in the room intensified. The figure's head tilted, that wrong, boneless movement that made my stomach lurch. It was listening, considering. "They can't help you." The voice was quieter now, but somehow more menacing, more intimate. "No one leaves this room, not anymore." I heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, hurried, getting closer. The figure turned back toward me. I could see more of the face now, the edge of an eye socket, deep and dark, the corner of a mouth that seemed too wide, stretched beyond what flesh should allow. "Look at me," it said. I wouldn't. I couldn't. I stared at the wall where the door used to be, at my photograph still pinned there, and I prayed to whatever might be listening that someone would find me, pounding, on the wall, right where the door should have been. Hey, you in there?" Earl's voice, muffled but unmistakable. "I know you're in there, boy. I felt it. The whole damn building felt it." The figure made a sound. Not quite a word. Not quite a hiss. Something in between. Something angry. "He can't reach you," it said. "The door opens from this side, and you're not leaving until—" "I ain't talking to you," Earl's voice thundered through the wall. 15 years I've worked in this building. 15 years I've kept your door closed, kept people away, played by your rules. You owe me." Silence. The figure had gone still, completely, utterly still, like a statue, like something that had never been alive in the first place. "You owe me," Earl repeated, quieter now. "Let the boy go. He's young. He's stupid. He didn't know. Take it out of my time if you have to, but let him go." I didn't understand what he meant. Take it out of his time? But the room was changing. The cold was receding, just slightly. The photographs on the walls had stopped moving, stopped watching. The air felt less thick. The figure spoke again, and this time its voice was different, almost amused. "You would trade for him? After what you've seen, after what you know?" "I've lived my life," Earl said. "He hasn't. That's the deal. Take it or leave it." Another silence. Longer this time. I could feel something shifting in the room, some invisible negotiation happening in a language I couldn't perceive. The figure turned away from me, fully away, its back to me once more. That gray head bowed like it was thinking. 3 years, it finally said. From you. For him. Done. The wall in front of me rippled, bulged outward. And then, like a wound opening, the door reappeared. The handle turned, and Earl was standing in the doorway, his face slick with sweat, his chest heaving like he'd run up 6 flights of stairs. "Get out," he said. "Now! Don't look back. Don't look at it. Just move." I ran. I didn't think, didn't hesitate. I just bolted through that doorway like my life depended on it, because I knew, somehow, that it did. I heard Earl behind me, his footsteps heavy on the carpet, the door to room 6B slamming shut with a sound like a thunderclap. We didn't stop until we reached the elevator. Earl jabbed the button, and we stood there, both of us breathing hard, neither of us speaking. The hallway behind us was empty, silent. The door to 6B was closed, just like always, that little window dark and featureless. The elevator arrived. We stepped inside. The doors closed. Earl sagged against the wall, suddenly looking every one of his 60-something years. He looked tired, more than tired, diminished somehow, like something had been taken from him. "What did you do?" I asked. My voice was shaking. "What did you give it?" He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw something I'd never seen there before. Resignation, acceptance. 3 years, he said quietly. Off the end. That's how it works. That's the deal it makes. Time for time. Life for life. I don't understand. You don't need to understand. The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened. Earl pushed himself off the wall and stepped out. You just need to leave this building and never come back. You hear me? Never. I followed him into the lobby. Terrence was at the security desk, oblivious, watching his little TV. The world looked normal, smelled normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. Earl ... Go home. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at his hands, turning them over like he was checking for damage. Forget this place. Forget that room. Forget me. I wanted to argue, wanted to thank him, apologize, do something. But the look on his face told me there was nothing left to say. So I left. I walked out of that building at 3:47 a.m. and I never went back. I called in the next day and quit. Didn't give a reason, didn't give notice. Deborah sounded annoyed but unsurprised, like she'd been through this before. I suppose she had. For the next few weeks, I tried to convince myself it hadn't happened, that I'd fallen asleep on the job and dreamed the whole thing. The photographs, the figure, Earl's voice through the wall, stress hallucinations, sleep deprivation, my brain filling in blanks with horror movie imagery. There were a dozen rational explanations, and I cycled through all of them, clinging to each one until it fell apart. But I couldn't explain away the cold, that bone-deep, marrow-freezing cold that had settled into me the moment I stepped through that door. It lingered for days. I'd take scalding showers, wrap myself in blankets, crank the heat until my apartment felt like a sauna, and still, somewhere deep inside, I was freezing. Like a piece of that room had followed me home. I tried to find Earl, called the building's main number, asked for him by name. They told me he'd retired. Suddenly, unexpectedly, effective immediately. No forwarding information. No way to reach him. I drove by his house once. I'd remembered him mentioning the neighborhood, found the address through some light internet stalking. The house was dark. A for sale sign stood in the front yard, swaying slightly in the autumn wind. The neighbors said he'd moved out a week ago. No one knew where he'd gone. 3 years, the thing in room 6B had said. 3 years off the end. Earl was in his 60s. He'd already lived most of his life. But 3 years he would have spent with his grandkids, in his garden, watching the world go by from his front porch. 3 years of sunrises and Sunday dinners and quiet evenings listening to the radio. He gave that up, for me, for a stupid kid who couldn't leave well enough alone. I think about that a lot. I graduated the following spring, moved out of state for a job, started a new life, tried to put as much distance between myself and that building as possible. It worked mostly. The nightmares faded. The cold eventually thawed. I could go days, sometimes weeks, without thinking about room 6B, but it never fully left me. Some things don't. I still can't look at photographs the same way. Group photos, family portraits, even just candid snapshots. Something about faces frozen in time makes my skin crawl. I keep my own photos digital now, stored on a hard drive I rarely open. I can't stand having them on the walls. can't stand the feeling of being watched by eyes that don't blink. And sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and I'm on the edge of sleep, I hear it. That voice. Not words, exactly. More like an echo of words, a memory of a sound that shouldn't exist. It whispers from the dark corners of my room, from the spaces between thoughts. They all stay. I went back once. I shouldn't have, but I did. It was 5 years after that night. I was in town for a friend's wedding, and I found myself driving past the building on my way to the hotel. I told myself I wouldn't stop. Told myself I'd just look, just see if it was still there, still standing, still housing whatever nightmare lived on the 6th floor. The building was gone. Not demolished. Gone. The lot where it had stood was empty, overgrown with weeds, surrounded by a chain-link fence, like it had been abandoned for decades. I pulled over, got out of my car, and stood there staring at nothing. At the space where 7 stories of glass and steel should have been. A man was walking his dog on the sidewalk nearby. I stopped him, asked what had happened to the office building that used to be there. He looked at me like I was crazy. "There's never been a building there," he said. "That lot's been empty as long as I can remember." I didn't argue, didn't try to explain. I just got back in my car and drove away, my hands shaking on the wheel, that old familiar cold creeping back into my bones. The building was gone. The records were gone. As far as the world was concerned, it had never existed. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And I know that somewhere, in some space that doesn't follow the rules of reality, Room 6B is still there, still waiting, still collecting its photographs, one face at a time. I think about Earl sometimes. I hope he's okay. I hope those 3 years didn't mean what I think they meant. I hope he's somewhere warm, with his grandkids, living out whatever time he has left. But late at night, when the voice whispers and the cold creeps in, I wonder. I wonder if he's in that room now, if his photograph is on that wall, if he's sitting in that wooden chair, facing away from the door, waiting for the next person who gets too curious. I wonder if, when the building disappeared, he disappeared with it. If you ever find yourself working alone in an empty building, cleaning, guarding, maintaining, whatever, and someone tells you not to go into a certain room, listen to them. Don't ask questions. Don't let curiosity get the better of you. Some doors are closed for a reason. Some rooms are meant to stay empty. And if you ever see a door with no nameplate, a window that swallows light, and a cold that doesn't belong, walk away, run if you have to. Because whatever's on the other side is patient. It's been waiting for a long, long time. And it's always looking for new photographs to add to its collection. Story 5. The person sleeping in my crawlspace without me knowing. There's a door in my hallway closet that I didn't open for the first 6 months I lived in that house. It was small, maybe 3 feet tall, cut into the back wall behind my winter coats, and painted the same off-white as everything else. The home inspector had mentioned it during the walkthrough. "Crawlspace access," he'd said, shining his flashlight through the opening for about 2 seconds before closing it again. "Pipes, insulation, nothing exciting. Looks fine." I never thought about it after that. Why would I? It was just one of those features old houses have. A little door to a dark space under the floor where spiders lived and heating ducts ran. I hung my coats in front of it and forgot it existed. I'd bought the house in March, right after my divorce was finalized. It was a small craftsman bungalow, built in 1942, on a quiet street in a neighborhood that had seen better days but was up and coming, according to my realtor. I didn't care about the neighborhood's trajectory. I cared that it was mine, that I could lock the door at night and know that no one else had a key, that I could finally stop sleeping with one eye open, waiting for Kevin to come home drunk and angry. The divorce had been ugly. Kevin hadn't taken it well. Hadn't taken anything well, really, in the 4 years we'd been married. When I finally got the courage to leave, He made sure I knew what a mistake I was making. Showed up at my work, called me 30, 40 times a day, sat in his car outside my apartment for hours. The restraining order helped, but it didn't make me feel safe. Nothing made me feel safe except putting 300 miles between us and buying a house with good locks and motion sensor lights and neighbors who actually seemed to notice when something was wrong. For the first few months, I was happy there, genuinely happy in a way I hadn't been in years. I painted the walls colors I liked. I adopted a cat, a fat orange tabby named Mango who slept at the foot of my bed every night. I started cooking again, started reading again, started feeling like a person instead of a shadow of one. The house had its quirks, like any old house does. The floors creaked in certain spots. The pipes groaned when I ran hot water. The wind made strange sounds in the eaves, especially on stormy nights. But I didn't mind. Those sounds became familiar, comforting even. The soundtrack of my new life. It wasn't until September that I noticed something was off. Little things, at first. Things I could explain away. A box of crackers I thought I'd just bought, suddenly almost empty. A blanket on the couch I didn't remember using. The back door unlocked one morning when I was sure, mostly sure, I'd locked it the night before. I blamed myself. I was still adjusting, still stressed from the move and the divorce and the process of rebuilding my life from scratch. Of course I was forgetting things. Of course I was misremembering. That's what happens when your brain is overloaded. But then Mango started acting strange. He'd always been a lazy cat, the kind who found a sunny spot and stayed there for hours, who only moved when food was involved. But suddenly, he was alert, watchful. He'd sit in the hallway outside the closet and stare at the door, his ears pricked forward, his tail twitching. Sometimes he'd growl, low and guttural, at nothing I could see. "What's wrong with you?" I'd ask him, scooping him up and carrying him away. He'd squirm out of my arms and go right back to that spot, those yellow eyes fixed on the closet like he was waiting for something to emerge. I told myself it was mice. Old houses have mice, especially when the weather starts getting cold. He was probably hearing them in the walls, in the crawlspace, doing whatever mice do. I made a mental note to buy traps and promptly forgot about it. Then the sound started. The first time, I was half asleep. It was maybe 2 a.m., that deep, heavy hour when the world feels muffled and wrong. I heard something beneath me, a soft thump, like someone shifting their weight. I lay there in the dark, heart beating a little faster, listening. Nothing. Just the usual creaks and groans of an old house settling. The second time, a few nights later, I was fully awake. Reading in bed, Mango curled up beside me, and I heard it again. Not a thump this time, but a scrape. Long and slow, like something being dragged across concrete. Mango's head shot up, his ears flattened against his skull. I told myself it was pipes, animals, the foundation shifting, anything but what some part of my brain was already whispering. The third time, I heard breathing. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds crazy, but I was lying in bed, in the dark, in the silence, and I heard someone breathing beneath me. Slow, rhythmic, the unmistakable sound of a person asleep. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just lay there, frozen, listening to that impossible sound rising up through the floorboards. It went on for maybe a minute, maybe two, and then it stopped, and I was alone again, staring at the ceiling, my whole body cold with a fear I couldn't name. The next morning, I stood in front of my hallway closet for a long time, staring at that little door behind my coats, thinking about what the home inspector had said. Crawlspace access, nothing exciting, looks fine. I should have opened it then, should have looked, should have known. But I was scared, scared of what I might find, scared of being right. So I told myself it was nothing. Moved the coats back into place. Went to work. And that night, when I came home, My leftover pasta was gone from the refrigerator. I hadn't eaten it. I lived alone. Someone else had. I stood in front of my open refrigerator for a long time that night, just staring at the empty shelf where the container had been, trying to make it make sense. Maybe I had eaten it. Maybe I'd been half asleep, made myself a midnight snack, and forgotten. That happens, right? People sleepwalk. People do things on autopilot and don't remember. The stress of the divorce, the new house, the constant low-level anxiety I'd been carrying for months. It would make sense if my brain was misfiring a little. But I didn't believe it. Not really. I could lie to myself about a lot of things, but I couldn't lie about the cold knot forming in my stomach. The one that said something was very, very wrong. I checked the locks that night, all of them, 3 times. Front door, back door, windows, the door to the garage. Everything was secure. Everything was exactly as it should have been, except that little door in the hallway closet. I didn't check that one. I couldn't bring myself to even look at it. The next few days, I started paying attention, really paying attention. I took photos of the food in my refrigerator before I left for work, marked the levels of milk and juice with a tiny line of tape, left little tells, a hair across the bathroom door, a piece of paper wedged in the closet frame. The kinds of things you see in spy movies, the kinds of things paranoid people do, the kinds of things victims do when no one believes them. The hair was gone the next day. The paper had fallen. The milk was lower than it should have been, the tape line now a 1/4 inch above the surface. Someone was in my house. Someone was eating my food, using my bathroom, moving through my space while I was at work. And at night they were beneath me, sleeping in the dark while I slept above them, separated by nothing but some old floorboards and a crawlspace I'd never bothered to inspect. I called a friend from work, Dana. We weren't close, but she was sensible, practical, the kind of person who didn't jump to conclusions. I told her what was happening, the sounds, the missing food, the evidence of intrusion. I expected her to tell me I was overreacting. "Call the police," she said immediately. "Tonight, don't wait." "And tell them what? That my milk is lower than I remember? Tell them you think someone's been in your house. They'll send someone to check it out." So I did. I called the non-emergency line and explained the situation, feeling ridiculous the entire time. The dispatcher was polite, but clearly skeptical. She said she'd send an officer by to take a report. He arrived around 8 p.m., young guy, probably mid-20s, with the kind of bored expression that said he'd rather be anywhere else. He walked through the house, checked the locks, shined his flashlight in a few corners. When I mentioned the crawlspace, he sighed like I was wasting his time. "You want me to check down there?" "Please." He went to the hallway closet, pushed aside my coats, crouched down and opened the little door, shining his flashlight into the darkness beyond. "Nothing," he said after maybe 10 seconds. "Just pipes and insulation. No signs of anyone living down there." "Are you sure? Did you actually go in?" He gave me a look, the kind of look men give women when they think we're being hysterical. "Ma'am, there's no one in your crawlspace. Old houses make noises. Food goes bad. We forget what we ate. It happens." He left me his card and told me to call if anything else happened. I watched him drive away, standing in my doorway, mango winding between my ankles. The officer hadn't found anything. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with all the lights on, mango pressed against my side, listening. The house was quiet, the usual creaks, the usual groans, nothing unusual until around 3 a.m. The sound was faint at first, a soft rustle like fabric against concrete. Then movement, careful, deliberate, the kind of movement that's trying not to be heard. It was coming from directly beneath my bedroom. Mango's head lifted. His eyes went wide, pupils blown black. A low growl started in his throat. I grabbed my phone, opened the voice recorder app, pressed record. For 3 minutes, I lay there in absolute silence, barely breathing. The phone held up like a talisman. The sounds had stopped. Whatever was down there had gone still, like it knew I was listening. I played the recording back the next morning, expecting nothing, expecting to hear my own paranoid breathing and the ambient noise of an old house. Instead, I heard something that made my blood turn to ice. Beneath the hiss of the recording, beneath my shallow breaths and Mango's soft growl, there was another sound. Rhythmic, steady, snoring. Someone was sleeping under my bedroom floor. Someone had been there, just feet away from me, while I lay awake listening, and I'd captured proof. I called in sick to work, sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, playing that recording over and over, trying to convince myself I was wrong, that it was some audio artifact, some weird frequency, anything but what it sounded like. But it was snoring, undeniably, unmistakably human snoring. I thought about calling the police again, thought about making them come back, making them actually search this time. But I remembered that officer's face, that dismissive look. He'd tell me it was pipes, tell me I was imagining things. I needed more proof. I needed to know who was down there, and there was only one way to find out. I walked to the hallway closet, pushed aside my coats, stared at that little door, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Whatever was on the other side, I was about to find out. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, one of those heavy metal ones that could double as a weapon if I needed it. My phone was in my back pocket, already dialed to 911, thumb hovering over the call button. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to stop, to wait for backup, to not do this alone. But I'd spent 4 years with Kevin waiting for someone else to save me, waiting for the police to take me seriously, for my family to understand, for someone, anyone, to see what was happening and do something about it. No one ever did. I'd had to save myself then, and I was going to save myself now. The little door opened with a soft creak. The smell hit me first, musty, stale, with something else underneath, something organic, the smell of a person, of unwashed clothes and body heat in an enclosed space. I shined the flashlight into the darkness. The crawlspace was maybe 4 feet high, stretching out beneath the entire footprint of the house. Concrete floor, wooden joists above, pink insulation stuffed between them, pipes running along the walls, ductwork snaking through the shadows. It looked exactly like what you'd expect a crawlspace to look like, except for the corner directly beneath my bedroom. There was a nest there. That's the only word for it. A pile of blankets and old clothes, arranged into a rough sleeping area. A pillow, my pillow, the one I'd thought I'd lost in the move. Empty food containers stacked neatly against the wall. Water bottles, some full, some empty. A plastic bag that looked like it held toiletries. And photographs. They were taped to the wooden joists above the nest, arranged in a careful grid. Dozens of them, maybe more. I couldn't see them clearly from where I crouched in the doorway, but I could see enough to know they were photos of a person, photos of me. My hands were shaking so badly the flashlight beam jumped and stuttered. I forced myself to breathe, forced myself to think. Whoever had been living down here wasn't here now. The nest was empty. The blankets were pushed aside, like someone had left in a hurry. They must have heard me, must have known I was coming. I should have stopped there, should have backed out, called the police, waited for help. But I needed to see those photographs. I needed to understand. I crawled into the crawlspace. The concrete was cold against my hands and knees. The smell grew stronger as I moved deeper, that thick, lived-in odor that made my stomach turn. The ceiling pressed down, claustrophobic, the insulation brushing against my back when I raised my head too high. I reached the nest and stopped. Up close, it was worse than I'd imagined. The photographs were everywhere, not just above the sleeping area, covering the joists in every direction, some overlapping, some curling at the edges from humidity. All of them were of me leaving for work, me getting the mail, me in my kitchen, visible through the window, me sleeping. That last one made me want to scream. It was taken from above, looking down at my face on the pillow, my eyes closed, completely unaware. Whoever took it had been standing over my bed, in my room, while I slept. There were dates written on some of them, little notations in handwriting I didn't recognize. The earliest one I could find was from April, 2 weeks after I moved in. They'd been watching me for 5 months. I forced myself to keep looking, even though every instinct told me to run. The food containers were brands I bought, my leftovers, my groceries. The water bottles were the same brand I kept in my fridge. Even the pillow smelled like my shampoo, pressed into the fabric from months of use. And then I found the notebook. It was tucked beneath the blankets, a cheap spiral-bound thing with a plain blue cover. I pulled it out with trembling fingers and opened it to the first page. The handwriting was cramped, obsessive, filling every line with no margins. It started with my name, my full name, including my maiden name, the one I'd gone back to after the divorce, and beneath it, a detailed log of my life. April 3rd. She came home at 6:15, made pasta for dinner, watched TV until 10, light off at 10:47. April 4th, left for work at 7:30, wore the blue dress, came home at 5:45 with groceries. She bought strawberries. April 5th, she sang in the shower this morning. Couldn't hear the words, but she sounded happy. I like when she's happy. The entries went on for pages, hundreds of them, every detail of my routine recorded with meticulous precision. What I ate, what I wore, when I showered, when I slept, the shows I watched, the phone calls I made, everything. Some entries were worse than others. May 12th, she left the bathroom door open. I could see her in the mirror. June 3rd, got close enough to smell her hair tonight. She didn't wake up. August 15th. She's scared. I can tell, but she doesn't know. Not yet. I want her to know soon. I want her to understand how much I love her. I dropped the notebook like it had burned me. My whole body was shaking now, violent tremors I couldn't control. Whoever this was, whoever had been living beneath my feet, watching me, documenting my life like some kind of specimen. They weren't just a squatter. They were obsessed, fixated, dangerous. And they knew I was on to them. They'd heard me coming. They'd fled, which meant they could come back. I scrambled backward toward the Crawlspace door, my phone already in my hand, my thumb hitting the call button. The 911 dispatcher answered on the second ring. "Someone's been living in my Crawlspace," I gasped. "They've been watching me for months. There are photos. Hundreds of photos. Please, you have to send someone." I was still talking when I heard it. The creak of a floorboard. Not from beneath me this time. From inside my house. From the hallway, right outside the closet door. Someone was standing there, blocking my only way out. And then, softly, almost tenderly, a voice I didn't recognize. "You found my room." The voice was soft, gentle almost. The kind of voice you'd use to soothe a frightened animal. It didn't match the situation. It didn't match anything. I couldn't see them. From where I crouched in the Crawlspace, all I could see was the rectangle of light from the closet, the hanging coats, the edge of the hallway beyond. But I could hear them. Hear the soft shuffle of feet, the creak of weight shifting on old floorboards. Ma'am, are you there?" The 911 dispatcher's voice, tinny and distant from my phone, still clutched in my hand. "Please," I whispered. "Someone's in my house. They're right outside the..." "I was going to tell you eventually." The voice again, cutting through mine, closer now. I was waiting for the right moment, I wanted it to be special. I pressed myself against the concrete wall of the crawlspace, my flashlight shaking in my grip. Through the small doorway, I saw movement, a shadow passing in front of the closet, then a face appearing in the opening. A man, thin, pale, with lank brown hair and eyes that caught the light from my flashlight and held it. He was maybe 40, maybe older. It was hard to tell. His features were soft, unremarkable, the kind of face you'd pass on the street and never remember. He was smiling. "There you are," he said, like we were playing hide and seek. Like this was a game. I didn't recognize him. I'd never seen him before in my life. "Who are you?" My voice came out strangled. "What do you want?" "I've been watching you since you moved in." He crouched down at the opening, his smile never wavering. "You were so sad at first, so scared, but you got stronger. I watched you get stronger. I'm so proud of you." The dispatcher was still talking, asking questions I couldn't process. I heard her say something about units being dispatched, about staying on the line. I clung to that. Help was coming. I just had to survive until help arrived. "Stay away from me." I held up the flashlight like a weapon. "The police are on their way." "I know, I can hear her." He tilted his head, that eerily calm smile still fixed in place. "We don't have much time. That's okay. I've waited this long. I can wait a little longer." He started to crawl into the opening. I screamed. The sound ripped out of me, raw and primal, bouncing off the concrete walls of the crawlspace. I scrambled backward, away from him, deeper into the darkness. My back hit something solid, a support beam, and I was trapped, cornered. He kept coming, slow and methodical, his movements almost graceful in the cramped space. His eyes never left mine. That smile never faltered. "Don't be scared," he said. "I would never hurt you. I love you. I've loved you since the first day I saw you, standing in the driveway, looking at your new house. You looked so hopeful, so beautiful." "I don't know you." I was crying now, tears streaming down my face. "I've never met you. Why are you doing this?" "You don't have to know me. I know you. I know everything about you." He was only a few feet away now, close enough that I could smell him. That same stale odor from the nest, the smell that had been seeping into my house for months. "I know you take your coffee with 2 sugars. I know you sing in the shower when you think no one can hear. I know you have nightmares about your ex-husband. I've watched you cry out in your sleep. I wanted to hold you so badly, but I knew you weren't ready." My hand closed around something on the ground, a piece of broken concrete, rough and heavy. I didn't think. I just swung. The impact was solid, sickening. It caught him on the side of the head, and he made a sound, not a scream, more like a surprised grunt, and fell sideways. Blood appeared on his temple, dark in the flashlight beam. I didn't wait to see if he was unconscious. I scrambled over him, my knees scraping on concrete, my hands clawing at the ground. He grabbed my ankle. His grip was strong, so much stronger than I expected, and I kicked back, felt my heel connect with something soft. His grip loosened, and I was free. The crawlspace door, the closet, the hallway. I burst out of the closet and ran. The front door was 20 feet away. I covered the distance in what felt like a single heartbeat, my hand closing on the knob, twisting, pulling. The door opened. Red and blue lights, sirens. A police cruiser in my driveway. 2 officers already out and running toward me. "He's inside," I gasped. "In the crawlspace, the hallway closet. He's..." They pushed past me, weapons drawn. I collapsed on my front lawn, shaking so hard I couldn't stand. A neighbor had come outside, was staring at me from her porch. The world felt too bright, too loud, too real. I heard shouting from inside, a scuffle, more shouting. Then they brought him out. He was handcuffed, blood still running down the side of his face from where I'd hit him, but he wasn't struggling, wasn't resisting. He was looking at me, only at me. That smile was gone now, replaced by something else, something that looked almost like heartbreak. "I'll wait for you," he called as they put him in the back of the cruiser. "However long it takes, I'll wait." The officer slammed the door, cutting off his voice. But I could still see him through the window. Still see those eyes, fixed on me, burning with something I couldn't name. The female officer who'd stayed with me put a blanket around my shoulders, asked if I had somewhere else I could stay tonight. I nodded, not really hearing her. I was thinking about what he'd said, what he'd written in that notebook. I want her to understand how much I love her. He didn't know me, had never met me, but he'd built an entire relationship in his head, constructed a fantasy where I was his, where we belonged together. And no matter what happened, no matter how many bars they put between us, that fantasy would keep going. In his mind, I would always be his. I'd escaped Kevin. I'd escaped 4 years of abuse, of control, of fear. And somehow, I'd walked right into something worse. Because at least with Kevin, I'd known who the monster was. This man, this stranger who'd slept beneath my feet for 5 months, I didn't even know his name. His name was Gerald Fitch. I learned that later, after the detectives finished processing my house, after I'd given my statement 3 separate times, after I'd spent the night at Dana's apartment, staring at the ceiling, unable to close my eyes. Gerald Fitch, 43 years old, no prior convictions, no history of violence. He'd worked as a groundskeeper at a cemetery about 2 miles from my house. He'd never been married, never had a girlfriend anyone knew of, lived alone in a studio apartment that the police described as unremarkable. His landlord said he was quiet, kept to himself, always paid his rent on time. The kind of man no one notices, the kind of man who fades into the background, invisible, forgettable. He'd seen me at the grocery store, the detectives told me. That was how it started. I'd been buying strawberries. I remembered that day, vaguely, the way you remember ordinary moments that turn out to be anything but. He'd been in the same aisle. I'd probably looked right at him and not registered his face at all. But he'd registered mine. Something about me had caught his attention, lodged in his brain, and refused to let go. He'd followed me home that day, watched me pull into my driveway, and then he'd started watching for real. The police found his car parked on a side street 3 blocks away. He'd been coming and going through a basement window he'd pried open during my first week in the house, before I'd gotten the security system installed. The system I'd never actually turned on because I'd felt safe enough without it. He'd been careful, patient. He only came out when I was asleep or at work. He used my bathroom, my kitchen, my shower, always cleaning up after himself, always covering his tracks. He'd been living parallel to my life, existing in the negative space for 5 months before I noticed anything was wrong. 5 months. 150 nights of him sleeping beneath me, watching me through cracks in the floorboards, standing over my bed in the darkness while I dreamed. I try not to think about that. I try not to imagine what else he did during those 5 months, what moments of my life he witnessed that I'll never know about. But sometimes, late at night, the thoughts come anyway, and I lie there in whatever bed I'm sleeping in, staring at whatever ceiling is above me, wondering if I'll ever feel safe again. Gerald Fitch was charged with stalking, breaking and entering, criminal trespass, and a handful of other charges I can't remember. His lawyer tried to argue mental illness, diminished capacity, some kind of delusional disorder that made him believe we were in a relationship. The prosecution pushed back. Hard. He took a plea deal. 15 years, with the possibility of parole after 10. 10 years. That's how long I have before he might be free again. 10 years of knowing exactly when he could be released, of counting down the days, of waiting for the notification that he's back in the world. And I know from his letters that he's still thinking about me. They started arriving about 6 months after his conviction. The prison is supposed to screen outgoing mail, but somehow they kept getting through. Always the same calm, gentle tone, always the same delusions. He tells me about his days, asks about mine, talks about our future together after he gets out, after I understand how much he loves me. I don't read them anymore. My lawyer handles them now, documents them for the inevitable parole hearings. But I know they're coming. Every few weeks, another envelope with that careful handwriting. Another reminder that I exist in his mind as something I never was, something I never could be. I sold the house. Couldn't even go back inside to pack. I hired a company to do it for me, to box up my life and ship it to a storage unit I've never visited. I moved across the country. New city, new job, new name. Dana's the only one from my old life who knows where I am, and even she only has a P.O. box. Mango came with me. He's older now, slower, but he still sleeps at the foot of my bed every night, still keeps watch. I don't know if cats can have trauma, but sometimes I catch him staring at closet doors with that same intensity he had back then. Sometimes he growls at nothing, and I have to remind myself that we're safe now, that no one knows where we are. I live on the 4th floor of a secure building. No crawl space, no basement, no little doors hidden behind coats. I have 3 deadbolts on my front door, and a security system I actually use. I check the locks before bed, then I check them again and again. My therapist says I have complex PTSD now, layers of trauma stacked on top of each other. Kevin, then Gerald, then the constant fear that came after. She says I'm making progress, that healing is possible, that I won't always feel this way. I want to believe her. Most days, I almost do. But then I'll see someone who looks a little too long at me in the grocery store, or I'll hear a creak in my apartment that I can't explain, or I'll wake up at 3 a.m., heart pounding, certain, absolutely certain that someone is watching me. And I remember what Gerald wrote in his notebook, what he said to me through the bars of that police cruiser. I'll wait for you, however long it takes. If you're reading this, I need you to understand something. The monsters aren't always strangers in dark alleys. Sometimes they're in the next aisle at the store. Sometimes they're the quiet man who keeps to himself, who no one notices, who everyone describes as normal. Sometimes they're already inside your house and you don't even know it. Check your locks tonight. Check them twice. And if you have a crawl space, a basement, an attic, any dark space you've never really looked at, look. Because the most terrifying thing about Gerald Fitch wasn't that he was crazy. It wasn't that he was obsessed. It was that he was patient. He waited 5 months before I noticed. He could have waited 5 years. And somewhere out there, right now, someone else is waiting too. The question is, who are they waiting for? Check your locks, please.